Robert Glazer, welcome to Dad Saves America.
Thanks for having me, John.
So we got introduced by a mutual friend. You run a very large marketing firm called Acceleration Partners, but you also blog and write and talk about work and life and values. And you have this new book, The Compass Within, which before we started rolling, I said I did not read, but we get to talk about. And the themes, as I understand it, are really important. So I guess let's just start here. Why write a book about values as a narrative, as a kind of fiction?
Yeah, so there's a whole thing about how I got there. So about 2013, I went to just as our company was starting to grow and I was having to figure stuff out. I went to a global leadership program with entrepreneurs organization in DC with about 20 people. And I thought it was a 5-day program. It was pretty intense. And I thought, I'm going to get here and learn all these tactical things about how to manage people. And the first 2 days were just like a big mirror. And I was like, who are you and what do you value? And you got to figure this out first, before you want to figure out how you're going to lead. And that was very compelling. And I was like, wow, I'm a very values-based person. I feel it deeply. However, I can't articulate exactly what they are. And nor did they give us the answer there, not because they were hiding it from us, because there wasn't a great process. And so I spent sort of 3 to 6 months figuring that out. I came away with these 5 core values, that I started realigning my family and business and life around that. And I always joke, everything everyone reads in my bio is after that moment. So I actually brought that back, what I figured out, to our leadership development programs. And we started teaching our leaders how to understand their core values, because I think that's where authentic leadership comes from. And when we get into it, there's a lot of reason. These values go to depth and childhood stuff that's going to be with you. So you're working with it or it's driving the car for you. And I had my book Elevate at the time, and I talked about this concept of spiritual capacity and understanding your strengths and what you value. And people would be like, great, I want to do that. And I'd be like, well, I can give you some, I don't really have the thing. And we've been doing this program at our company. But after doing it 4 or 5 times, I was like, wow, I have a process that works. So I turned it into a course, told people about it. 2,000 people took it. So more, they'd write me all these amazing notes. And I'm like, I kind of want to get this to more people. But a lot of people aren't going to jump into a course. I've written some books. And I just had this vision of writing this book called Core Values or On Values and no one wanting to read it. Because when, they hear the topic, they're like, yeah, I know what this is or whatever. And it seems vague and it seems a little obtuse and
Abstract,
yeah, more than obtuse. It seems vague and abstract. And I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni and Bob Berg. And actually my daughter, who I'm always challenging to do things outside of her comfort zone, happened to one day said, your whole word's nonfiction. You read nonfiction, you write nonfiction, you should write a fiction book. And it sort of clicked for me one day when I was thinking about that, being like, I think I could engage people in this more if I could show it to them or in a story rather than just tell it to them. I have never done this before, but I could try. And so I sat down and I tried to write a parable, which was fun, but it was hard. In fiction, you actually need the whole, nonfiction, you kind of need the whole structure before you start, or else it kind of ends up a mess. Fiction, you can write, but I never had to keep track of character development or time or any of these things. So that was basically how it came full circle, was how do I get this idea to more people? Because I think it's really life-changing, but in a way that makes it addressable and understandable.
All right, I'll keep this quick. If you like what you're hearing and want to hear more, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our new content as it comes out every week. And now, back to the conversation. One of the sort of big influence in my life is an economist named Russ Roberts. And he's actually done a similar thing with several of his books, The Price of Everything being one of them, where he took economics and tried to put it into a personal kind of narrative structure. It's tough.
The Goal is one of the famous books on operations ever, and it's a parable, on the theory of constraints, and it's told through a story of a factory, and it's super. Instead of a boring book on, it's a super engaging story about how do you figure out where the bottleneck is in the business.
I think, my background is in film and in documentary, and so one of the things that I've thought a fair amount about is what is the purpose of story, right? Because I'm also Catholic, I'm a Christian, so Jesus taught in parables. I think in some ways you could say story is this thing that we developed as a creature to impart moral knowledge. That's
how we taught for years, right? You
Right.
passed along stories.
Grimm's fairy tales. The moral of the story is like a easy mimetic phrase, I think, for a reason. So what is the moral of the story? I'm going to save the plot for people who can buy the book, but let's get to the underlying philosophy, the 5 values. I do feel like we're in a time where our kids are struggling with this. They're struggling with how to think about what their values are and where to draw them from. So what are these 5? Let's break it down.
Yeah. So in terms of my values, yeah, which is not, the book is not about my values. And just to cue in your storytelling thing, I think, look, there's a protagonist in this story, Jamie Hines, but people who have read the preview copy have said to me, oh, I saw myself in that moment, or I had that. He's just a reflect. I think that's what stories give us. They give us a reflection where it's a prompt where we can put ourselves in that story and the character. So yeah, the moral is there's a framework that I have developed that Jamie gets coached through by a mentor, that it can help people identify their definitive, actionable core values, and then they can make lots of better decisions. My dominant core value is to find a better way and share it. That's literally why I'm sitting here today. That's what the book is about. Self-reliance, health and vitality, and long-term orientation, and now I'm forgetting the 5th one right now. Oh, respectful authenticity is one that's kind of unique for me and actually directly led to the TED Talk, that we'll talk about at some point.
Yeah. Okay, so let me repeat these for me one more time so I can bake them into my head.
Yeah.
So go for it.
Yeah. So find a better way and share it.
Yep.
Long-term orientation, respectful authenticity, health and vitality, and self-reliance.
So find a better way and share it. Very entrepreneurial.
It's a common orientation. I've done like the why stuff, the derivative stuff, Simon Sinek, and it's a very common thing for founders of companies.
What is that all about, and how can somebody who doesn't see themselves as an entrepreneur root that as a value? It's an interesting thing to think about as a value. I'm processing that. How do you think about it as a value?
Yeah, so it's interesting in the wording of how you said it is, we'll get into this. Getting your actual core value, it is not aspirational. These are not things that you want to be. In fact, there's an epiphanous moment that Jamie has in the book when he figures them all out. And I always tell people when it happens, I can watch it in their face. It's like someone gave them a stencil and they start placing it back on 16 and 18 in that job. And they're like, oh, all makes sense. Now I get hated it, loved it, hated her, loved him. Like it kind of all makes sense. So look, and they tend to come from things that are pretty, formative. And I think when I do my presentations, I start with actually these 5 years of report cards that I got that were all pretty horrible, saying like, I was a pretty entrepreneurial kid. I like to color outside the lines. Elementary school likes you to sit down and be quiet and follow instructions. So the things that I was actually good at, people kind of told me, don't do those. And literally, my framework is capacity building. These 5 report cards was like basically all said a different version of the same thing. He seems really capable, but we just can't motivate him to do anything. And I know he can do better work. That was what the 5th grade teacher said. She just gave up. So it's a very personal, after years of being told, hey, like you could seem to do better, that sort of stayed with me. And then at some point it flipped for me. I figured out what I liked. And then it just became almost like an overdrive thing to the point where it can also become negative. But my mom would tell you to this day, she would tell me to clean my room as a kid and I would rearrange the whole thing. Like I like to figure it out. And I'm people with a stealth company. I'm like, if you know something and it can help, why wouldn't you share that? So it's just unique to me.
This sense of having more capability than you're exploiting is something that resonates with me as a father. I feel like, without sharing too much of our home life stories, I think I have a tendency to do that probably too much. This is the struggle I feel like a lot of us have as parents with our kids, especially our kids right now who are struggling. And actually my son's doing fine, but I had a conversation with him recently where he actually kind of said, I've realized I haven't been being hard enough on myself in a certain sense,
Yeah.
or like not pushing myself hard enough. Like I've sort of skated by on being smart enough to kind of do the minimum.
That's how I would have defined my child. I was good enough to get by, but the real inner frustration was knowing that I was smarter and that I was not. Knowing that you're not meeting your potential is a really painful thing. So it wouldn't be surprising that someone who felt that way for a long time would then, develop this thing called capacity. Again, we do these things, pain and purpose lie close to each other. We don't even realize how connected it is. I think no one wants to live below their potential. The problem is people are kind of told about their potential through the expectations of what others want from them, and not like, who are you and what do you value and what would good look like for you? Good for me wasn't sitting down, being quiet, following the lines. That wasn't good. The Dave Rendell, do you know who Dave is? Dave is this like 6'7", massive ADD guy. He wears all pink, and he has this book called The Freak Factor. And when Dave spoke, he goes, my whole life, people told me to sit down, shut up, and whatever the third thing was in class. He's like, I literally get paid to stand up, talk around, walk, and go off script. If you as younger and you would have said to me, you can make a career doing that, he would have been like, that, I'm good at that. I want to do that. But no one ever told me that was something that I could do.
How do you think about how do you understand potential? Because, and partly because as an employer, you're dealing with a lot of people, and we're going to get later in our conversation to this, because you've got, I think, really good things to say about trying to create a humane work environment.
Yeah.
And your company is very well rated on that regard as far as employees, and you've really put yourself out there for that. But when you are managing people, you're trying to assess like their potential to some extent, and you're trying to help them meet it and exceed it if you're doing your job right. The same is true as a parent. To some extent, I almost feel like as parents, we have less. It's like it's so much more complex. So and we're so biased because we love our kids.
Yeah.
That like, it's hard to think about like, do I have a good do I even know what my kid's potential is? Like, how do you think about that? How do you think about like knowing someone else's potential and knowing your own potential,
and not polluting it with I saw a child development specialist. She's one of the top people out there. She spoke to a group and she said, why did you all have kids? And they all answered. And she's like, you're all wrong, basically. And it was like, every one of you told me something that's about you, not about them. And so I think it's hard, right? In terms of, am I thinking of the potential like, oh, I think you should be a doctor. And why is that? Or you've seen these crazy sports parents. The pathology of a lot of the crazy sports parents is that they weren't good enough and they want their kid to be better, right? That's a lot to put on your kid.
Tiger Woods' dad, getting him started at 6.
Yeah, I mean, all this club sports stuff, and the kids are all burning out by 60. You can't play a sport 5 days a week if you don't love it. Like, eventually, even if you're good, you're going to burn out. So I think it's encouraging people to understand what's important to them, what their skills are, what they're good at, how can they do it. My kids are all very different students, but when I talk to the, one of them in particular, I think about, it's like, hey, like, did you really do what you could do? Like on this, like, did you study as much? I get it if you don't get it, if it's not your thing, but like, did you really do the best that you can do? So this is, it's funny. The next book I have is actually a curious look at why parenting and leadership have diverged in such different directions, when things that we have come to accept in the workplace as horrible leadership and things you would never want from your boss are dominant parenting step that doesn't make any sense to me, particularly when people cross over into both sides. Like, we know that the number one thing in the workplace that people will tell you is horrible and debilitating and everything is micromanagement. Hate it, right?
Yes.
If you're tracking me,
also known as snowplow parenting, right?
So you're not letting me answer things. You're interfering. Like, it's you would be put on a performance review. If all of your people said that you micromanage them, and it's dominant form of parenting these days. I'm tracking you. I'm calling your coach. I'm interfering. All this stuff. So in the aggregate, why do I think we've gotten here because I think it was very noble a couple of generations ago when you had an objectively hard life and you worked in a mine and you worked in these jobs that had no security and health to want better for your kids. I think wanting better for your kids has far past reached diminishing returns. My kids do not need better. They don't need better than anything I had or otherwise. The best thing I can do is help them figure out each of them and try to cultivate whatever that capacity and was each of them. And it's got to be different, right? A lot of parents have the program. You're going to go on the program and it's going to be the standard program. I had 2 kids in public school, 1 kid in private school. They needed different things.
I have a bias on the education front that I've talked a lot about on this channel, which is towards self-directedness. And one of my favorite new friends is a woman named Catherine Burbelsing, who says, that's all a bunch of progressive hogwash. It's all terrible. And you've done terrible disservice to your kid by having all that be the thing you chose. Kids need knowledge. They need to be taught knowledge, not how to think. They have nothing about which to use their thinking to do. They need to be given raw material in the form of knowledge. And then later, when they have knowledge, they have a sense of what history is. Then they can start to understand what their values are, how to think, who they are.
That's your take or her take?
That's her take.
That's her take.
I find her increasingly persuasive, and I don't know if it's I'm getting older.
I'm split on that. Yeah.
But when we think about values and we think about our kids, how do you think about value formation? Like, where does that start as a parent? And for you, like, where is that coming from? Because like our kids are just like little crazy monsters.
Yeah.
So their values are, from an early age are like pure selfishness and narcissism.
Right.
So they need to get it from somewhere. How do you think about that?
So there's a lot of intersecting circles here. I think, and this book is a proponent of, you and your partner should have your own clear values. Now, in a good world, they're going to want to intersect. I would say, and you can have this as a magnet, right? You can have a little points that are off. If this is an inverse magnet, you got problems.
Yeah.
And I'm talking in the book. I actually do not think a relationship or a community or a vocation can work if you have, huge disconnect on the values. So my wife and I have different values, and I should say not the same identical values, and we are different people, but we agree on the big stuff, and we always have. We sat down with our kids, early on, and we let them help co-create, those family values. And what I've noticed from people that have done this is instead of rules, I find it much more values in a company. If you have 3 or 4 good values, the combination of those can save you hundreds of pages of a manual. One of the best CEOs I know who had great company values said, anyone who makes the decision of one or more of our values in service of the business is always safe. That's a pretty bold declaration. You also probably shouldn't have a company value do whatever it takes if that's what you want. Right. So we sat down with our kids years ago and we had them sort of co-create them, and we put them up on a wall and we tried to use them. So they were simpler because they were for kids, and they were be happy and healthy, be respectful, resilient, and responsible, and be kind. And I joke around that I think one of my favorite moments as a parent was in a parent-teacher conference where I think those were 6 words, and the teacher used 4 of them in one of my kids' sort of write-ups, they're this, that, and that. And so let's go to the be healthy, because that's for me and for them. So look, we might be having a conversation about one kid who is skipping meals, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of saying, don't do that, or you can't do that, or whatever, be like, hey, that's not healthy. Similarly, with a different kid, we might be having a discussion, hey, the 4th brownie, not healthy. Not you can't do it or otherwise. And one of my favorite stories a guy told me on my podcast on this was his daughter was going out for her prom, and they were about to negotiate over curfew. And let's say he was like, he wanted her home by 1 a.m., and she was like, so what's my curfew? Now, he could have said, here's an arbitrary rule, which has a lot of power dynamics to it. And he said, look, sweetie, your mom and I are going to be probably awake until you get home and nervous. It's a lot of people are on the road or whatever. So you pick what you think is fair, but like, we won't really get to sleep until you get home. And she was like, how's 12? And he was like, that's great. But when he presented it in that way, it was totally different. So I have a friend who says, I won't say the family name, although in this case, he says, the Smiths, we do not lie. Right. And that is his constant thing. Look, there might be a lot of other things, or I have another one family from Austin. He goes, the Jackson family, we do hard things. So you can say these things, but the question is, do you do them? And I try to use those words as much as I can. Like, hey, like, this is one of those times you just need to be resilient. Like, it sucks. You need to get through it. And that's how same thing in a company. They only become meaningful if you kind of live them. And look, I'll give you kind of an example of this.
Yeah.
Where one of my favorite inventions for my kids was this harness, this dual locking harness that basically let self obstacle courses happen, because if you clip one side, the other side unclips. So you could basically go on a whole obstacle course in the trees by yourself and pick like green, blue, and black. You can't. I love things that are safe and uncomfortable for my kids. I think that's the magic quadrant. You can't get hurt, but you can be pretty uncomfortable.
Good stuff. That's good parenting from my perspective.
So,
for sure.
So my son's 10, and I have the picture, and I use it in a presentation, and we're doing the pretty hard medium course, and he gets halfway up this really tough exercise, and I got to it. And it was actually like an awesome picture because he was coming up this thing. So I took out my camera to take a picture, and he had a complete meltdown like a second later. And he was like, I can't, you have to come get me. Mm-hmm. And every other parent around is like, yeah, go get him. Like, and I was like, bud, you're totally fine. And I was not going to rescue him because he was uncomfortable, but he was entirely physically safe. And I was like, you can stop, take a breath. You can totally get through this. Walked him through it. Again, people are looking like if they could have shot me, the other parents, they would have. But these are the parents who, at any sign of discomfort, they want to jump in. So this is how it plays forward. He makes it to the other side. We finished the course. We're there a month later. He and his friends, he's running through and showing them all how to do it. 3 months later, the Patriots make the Super Bowl. He's not even 11 years old. I think he gained a ton of confidence that day by doing that. And the next time around, my father-in-law are going. He's like begging to come with us all week. We couldn't get him a ticket. Like he had been writing in his he'd been telling me he had dreams about being at the Super Bowl. He had this vision board with Tom Brady in the Super Bowl from what he made in the past. I get to the airport as we're about to leave, and all of a sudden, and I was like, bud, we're coming back on this special flight, and there are no seats, and I don't even have a ticket, and there was a ticket. And so I grabbed the flight back. That was the hard thing, getting back. And then I text this guy on a plane, and there's a ticket. He has a ticket for the Super Bowl, like an extra ticket. And so now I'm like, my wife was going to kill me when I called her. And I was like, so I just have to figure out how to get him there. So there's one flight that leaves at 7 a.m. from Boston to Houston. It's a 4.5 hour flight. He's 10 and a half years old, never flown on a plane by himself. Called him like, bud, I can get you the Super Bowl, but first we got to talk to mom about taking you to the airport. But you have to fly by yourself on this plane for 4.5 hours. He's like, Dad, I got it. I'm in. We saw the Super Bowl. We were at the greatest Super Bowl ever, the comeback. And I am convinced to this day that moment on the obstacle course was a series of events around his confidence that led a 10 or 11-year-old to be like, I'll go fly by myself for 4.5 hours to be able to do something that he wanted to do.
I have a somewhat similar and somewhat similarly bougie story.
Yes, this is first world struggle. Let's be clear. But actually, the first world struggle, but it's more relevant because these are the things that people are trying to save people from versus real physical hardship, right?
Well, it is interesting. This channel began because of my own personal observations about the anxieties that my son's friends were experiencing, who are, again, like relatively well off. It's not like we're billionaires, but we do relatively well. Go into a private school. Why are all these kids anxious? Their life is great. Yeah. What are you anxious about? So, and I actually think that the rates of anxiety are worse among the relatively well-off.
They are 100% the data. Everyone doing worse has the most means and resources.
Yeah, and it's like, and my views on immigration writ large are in flux in a lot of ways, but I'm generally much more pro-immigration than our dialogue these days.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is like, I just know a lot of immigrants who come here, including people who work for me, and they just have grit, and they are like the most American, as I understand it, like the most American mindset, to get things done, persevere, have grit.
Family, community.
Yeah. And we're sitting here in Texas. A lot of Mexican families are exemplars of this.
Yeah.
Actually, like Latino immigrants, I think, are the largest new business starting group, if you want to divide things in that kind of way. And I think that speaks to that. It speaks to this weird
necessity is the
weird
mother
stuff.
of all. Yeah, around us, there's a hiking mountain near us. And what I have noticed is in the morning on a Saturday, mostly Hispanic families, they have these massive tent steps, barbecue, whole families, football, and I'm like, God, everyone could benefit from that. Like, and the well-off families are not together, and one's at club soccer, and the other's at baseball, and one's at Russian math.
Yeah,
and I'm thinking to myself, this is all backwards.
I have this is getting off the beaten trail a little bit, but I have this very low resolution subject to change hypothesis that's sort of like cycles of history. And that is that the sort of northern, let's say northern Anglo ethos that founded America, the sort of Protestant work ethic that I think is almost like weather. The weather played a role. Like to survive cold winters in the UK and Scotland and the Nordic countries, you need
hard.
It's hard. It's like you need to save now for tomorrow because you're not going to be able to have crops in the winter.
Yeah.
It's like you see this pattern that like the North and cold produces something like the Protestant work ethic.
Yeah.
And the South, and I'm Southern Italian by descent, so like I'm ragging on my own genetics here, tend to be lazy because the weather's nice and because you don't need to think about the future. You can just sort of pluck the fruit from the tree in the present. And so I feel like America over-indexes or has historically for the Northern Protestant work ethic. And we're now at this weird point where we're trying, like, we don't integrate
because
culturally the Southern thing, the Southern family thing.
$500,000 with two homes want easier for their kids. They want to make their life easier. I mean, I talk to people who have made a lot of money and they really want to make more money. And why? And I'm like, what? So you can entitle and mess up multiple like you're worried about your great grandkids. You think it'd be cool if your great grandkids never had to work a day in their life? Like, it doesn't, historically, that has never proven to be a really good thing.
And it doesn't work. And it's like, so I think there's like this North-South fusion thing that's part of our cultural struggles right now.
You were going to tell this story.
Oh, just real quick.
Your bougie story.
My bougie story is that when my son's best friend, Mario, his family moved to London after third grade. And so we actually
the same thing happened.
And it was really a bummer. And God bless the internet because they're still friends.
Yeah.
And that would have been impossible. Like it used to be like if your friends moved a couple, if your friends moved more than like
pals and you never heard from them again.
If they moved more than a 30-minute drive, it was like they vanished from reality, never to be heard from again. I had a neighbor, Seth. Parents moved not that far, vanished.
Right.
Never to be heard from again. So we put Matteo at 10 years old on a plane to London by himself. And we were comfortable with that for very same, almost ideological reasons. Like this is exciting for him. I can't afford to fly us all out there
as a chaperone, right? Twice, yeah.
Like I can't take off work, but he can visit.
And by
his
the way,
friend.
nothing is going to happen. Like in the world of cell phones and whatever. My parents put my sister. She talks about this day she went to the wedding of one of our like nannies when you were younger, who helped out, who got older, and she was like 8 years old and went on a connecting flight by herself. There are no cell phones. Again, she survived. Like they seem like really hard, but they're such first world problems that you don't even realize, right?
So you have this practice of resilience, of figuring out that you have capacity. So your son is hanging there, terrified. And he's terrified, at least in part, probably because he just doesn't think he can solve the problem
He's
himself.
gassed. He's physically and mentally tired, and he thinks he can't do it. Yeah.
So that lesson that I can do the thing I didn't think I can do.
So empowering.
Yeah, talk about that. Because I feel like that's the lesson that's the hardest one.
Well, this is the savior. So let's go back. We are hardwired as parents to biologically protect our kids from danger. And all the people say this is the worst time in the history of the world. Let's just go back like 70 years, 100, 200, 300, you're foraging for food. Like it's a little bit different. Most of those dangers were physical, right, in these old worlds. But this biological protection mechanism that we have doesn't go away. So what's been the real problem in the 20, 30 years? We're using it to shield them from emotional danger. And it turns out, if you believe in Nassim Taleb and Anti-Fragile and a lot of this work, that requires exposure. You only develop your resilience and through exposure. You can't, if you live in a bubble, you will, die of exposure to everything. But our brain just feels like, I see Johnny struggling and I have to save him. And again, I go back to that 2x2, unsafe. Is it safe but uncomfortable? And there's a whole matrix around that. And I'm looking at physical safe. Like, is his life in danger? I'm okay with discomfort because we're gonna have discomfort. And what you're seeing, for all this school and achievement and everything, that a lot of the product that's showing up as 20-year-olds in these companies can't handle getting anything wrong or having some feedback or some red ink. So you can put that off for a long time, but eventually it comes. And the longer you haven't been exposed to it, it seems like the harder the fall. So parents are in this savior complex and they won't look, we have a lot of friends with kids going through 7th and 8th grade and the stuff that happens.
The Hunger Games of middle school.
It's terrible. We've all been through it and you have empathy, but you can't save them. You can't call another kid and yell at them or get involved. Like there is they have to learn. My daughter has a habit of calling me sometimes, she is a very kind person and she deals with people who are rational and she struggles with people who are irrational. I'm like, this is welcome to life.
She struggles with people who are rational.
Irrational. My advice to her always is welcome to life. And you need to learn how to navigate around people like this. They will be in your life. They will be your boss one day. So instead of getting so frustrated at it, let's see how you can this is training. But this is where parents who mean very well are doing a ton of harm. And if you look at all of the data, it all says the same thing. Why, as you said, are the most affluent, most resourced kids, carving things into them, depressed. They're the most anxious. It doesn't make any sense. So, which proves that it's not about hardship, because the kids who are dealing with food insecurity and housing stuff and having to work 2 jobs, they're struggling. They're not anxious. So why is that?
It really undermines this idea that sort of comes out of Marx, that we are the product of our economic conditions, that the human is just our psychology is just rooted in our material conditions, and that's it. That's clearly not true. The twin studies disprove that, because you can take twins, put one in a poor household that's totally different than this, and one here, and they actually end up being sort of similar. There's just so much. There's so many things that we take for granted in our discussions about human nature that are just wrong.
There's a lot of things of kids that go through war, war torn, go through a war. They have other issues. They have less anxiety than kids in the suburb. And so why? Because actually there's connection, there's a shared struggle, there's a lot of things that go on, versus this loneliness that comes from living disconnected in large suburban, wealthy places. So it is an interesting problem. And I hope that parents, what I don't understand and why I started this work on the next book is look, in leadership, when you see that whatever you're doing is producing a horrible outcome, you change what you're doing. we're 20 years into this helicopter, snowplow, or whatever you want to call it, parenting, and people doubling and tripling on, and the results are worse and worse than ever. And all the data says very clearly that is not, the data's been clear on for 100 years on what the best form of parenting is. And the quick thing is high support, high standards. We went from, everything's an overreaction. We went from high standards and no support, and then everyone being like, I'm just going to be super supportive, and now there's no standards. Objectively, that might produce a better result. Like, I know a lot of people probably our age who probably lacked some emotional support when they were young, and they feel like they are not great with emotion because of, you know, their parenting. However, they're functioning human beings in society, whereas you have 20-year-olds and stuff these days who just can't function because it's all emotion and no resilience.
I want to come back to some of the other values you listed, but I can't help but dive into the workplace here because you are a large employer. You've put a lot of thought into trying to create a good work environment. And your TED Talk actually speaks to this. So your TED Talk was about the problem of 2-week notice.
Yeah.
So, and it's on both sides. So and as a longtime employer myself, it resonated very deeply. When somebody that you value that's part of the team comes in, closes the door and
says, "Hey, John, you got a minute?" Yeah,
and it's like,
right. So
no, everything's about to be derailed. You're going to tell me you're putting in your 2-week notice.
Yeah,
it takes like 3 months to find somebody, and even if they're right, it takes another 6 months to get them to be up to speed.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so those are all the reactions you described in the book. And here's the next thing that's going to run through your head. Oh, you had all these doctor's appointments the last month, and I told you that was fine, and that was all a lie. Because again, this is the playbook, so now how things start and how they end. And I saw Dan Pink's book out there.
Yeah.
You know, he talked about this in When have a disproportionate impact on our memory. If you're holding a conference, you want a good opener and a good closer. And so this is the process of how it ends starts to ruin the entire memory of that experience.
Yeah. So as the employer, we'll talk about that because I resonated so much I could make the mistake.
I thought we were building a great culture and an open, honest culture, and we were a client service business. And this 2-week notice thing drove me nuts because it was terrible for our clients. Any of us who are in a client service relationship, insurance, but the biggest risk for a company is change an account manager quickly, right? Particularly when the whole relationship is there. So I was like, this sucks for our business. I also don't this doesn't feel like open and honest and psychological safety, but this is all people know. This is what their parents tell them to do. This is the sort of US playbook. By the way, it's not the playbook in the rest of the world. It's distinctively American. And you don't even have to give 2 weeks. Someone decided that you can leave, we're at will. Someone decided that that's the right barometer. And half the companies have a policy of walking you out that day after you give 2 weeks notice. So that's all kind of messed up in itself.
And there's reasons for that too. I mean, sometimes for the people who aren't in this position of being an employer, and there's a bunch of stuff here that's
do
hard.
Bad stuff.
I mean, gosh, I moved around a lot in my early career within Viacom.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. The second you decided you were going to leave, it's like you're a different person and you're engaging.
You quit and stay.
Yeah. And then the other piece of the puzzle is the second you put in your notice, even if you've got a lot of runway, you feel yourself being unwoven from the fabric of the organization out of necessity. And so there's like game theory things that are part of this.
So this is my find a better way and respectful authenticity put together. And I was like, this problem doesn't make sense. We're not in lifetime employment anymore. We know that people are going to leave. You go and look at Glassdoor and it's 2.5 years at the top companies. So why are we treating this like the end of a relationship and not the end of a sports contract, right? You have a sports player, they're playing out their free agent year. You know they're going to leave. There's not weirdness. They're going to do their job and then they're going to leave. It didn't make sense to me. So we had a guy, I call him sort of patient zero in the book, in the TED Talk, and we did the whole PIP thing, and we were going to do it again because
what's a PIP?
performance improvement plan. So this is the like 90-day warning. And by the way, a lot of people just do it because they're told by their attorneys that it provides them legal coverage. That is actually not true. People can sue on anything, and people sue because they feel disrespected. And when you do a PIP that sets up someone to fail, when you're planning on firing them and you just think you're documenting it, well, that's going to make the person more angry. So that logic is totally doesn't make any sense. So he had done better, as people do when their job's on the line, and then he was regressing again. And we kind of had a real conversation. He's like, I kind of want to do something different. And we're like, well, we kind of want this client to, not have a bad situation. So how about let's try something else. You start looking for a job. You kind of manage out your work here, but start looking for a job and do this. Keep in touch with us. Tell us how it's going. And why don't we, when we made some mistakes, but not of time, let's take a couple months and see if we can find you a better place to work. And we made some mistakes on it, but it worked pretty well. And I was like, well, that's good. What if we could encourage people that leaving isn't the end of the world? And either we can start a conversation, and I can lead it, or in what we really do is get the employee to start it and tell them, hey, if you come start a conversation that I think I might want to do something else or whatever, no one is going to walk you to the door. No one is going to fire you. We would like to try this transition thing. We did it for years. People started asking me about it. I did the TED Talk. I wrote it up sort of in a book in my, hey, here's how you do it. And people all the time would tell me a million reasons, but I just had people I hadn't met reach out and be like, look, I saw your video, or I saw the thing at the conference. And even without all the tactical, they're like, I tried it, and actually it's so much better. Now, it doesn't work all the time, and there's a problem, there's some issues. But it's just this, just because we've always done something like that, those are my fighting words. Well, we can talk about anti-values, as a find a better way person, someone telling me, well, we've always done it that way. Those are that's fighting words, right? The true test of a value is that the opposite of it causes you deep discomfort, and people that say that cause me deep discomfort.
Yeah, the status quo. The status quo can have value in that it survived for a reason. But a lot of times it survived for a reason because everyone thinks it survived for a reason.
And you need it at some point. You need a process.
Collective illusion that this is the only way to do things.
Right. But to make the comment that it's not even saying that it's the better way, but just that because we've done it that way, and that is the justification, doesn't make any sense to me.
So I want to play this out for a little bit. How do you communicate this to the staff? What does that look like?
So great question, because I want to be really clear. People read the book, they watch the TED Talk, and they're like, I should go and tell my employer that, I want something else, so I should do this. I'm like, you should not do that, because if your company walks people to the door every day, then they'll do that. I am speaking to company leaders and people who have the ability to put that system in place and then try to encourage people to leverage it. This is not an employee-led thing. It's an employer-led thing. So you have to roll it out. You have to tell people 7 times, and you have to say, look, we have this transition program. So a lot of times, John and I are sitting down, John, hey, it's not going that great. This has been the second or third quarter. We've talked about this, you're 50% of your quota. Look, we have this blue pill and red pill thing. The blue pill is I put you on a 30-day PIP, and if you don't improve, you're gone. The red pill is we have this open transition program, and if you opt into it, we'll give you 90 days. You keep doing your duty. We'll start hiring for your job. You can start interviewing, but we're kind of deciding that you realize I don't want to be in sales, or this isn't going to work. You have the honest conversation, which is I don't want to do the work to get better. I want a different job. This is not for me. And get people to choose that pill, basically. And then you have to communicate to the company. You have to say, here's what's involved, and here's how we support you. And by the way, we can end it at any time if you start doing things that you shouldn't do in the parameters, but all kinds of objections. And I have a chapter in the book on what are all the objections. People are like, well, people are going to steal things and cheat and lie and whatever. I'm like, okay, let's dig into that. One, if someone really wanted to, they've stolen it months ago, before they're going to tell you this. And two, I'm helping them. I'm letting them get interviewed. We're working on a good conclusion. Why are they going to act badly, now? And my favorite thing was someone, was saying once, well, but everyone who leaves my company, they're always stealing stuff. So if this stealing thing and causing like problems at the end, the answer is, man, if you have all these people stealing stuff and doing all this stuff as they're leaving your company and causing disruption, two things are true. One, you really suck at hiring and like stop hiring horrible people that would do this. Or two, there's something so toxic about your culture that when people leave here, they want to burn down the place. Both of these require a little introspection.
It is interesting. I think like it reminds me of something that I've heard about. If you find drugs on your kid, like what that means is they have been doing all kinds of stuff for a very long time because they have gotten so sloppy that they let you find something.
And everyone gets caught the first time, right?
Yeah, and it's always said like, oh, this is the first time. But because we're kind of all stupid because we're parents and we're also as helicoptery as we are, we're all busy. We have multiple.
Yes.
Everybody's working. So our kids are smart. They're sort of conniving. And if they get so sloppy that you catch them, it's too late. So it's sort of the same thing. Like if people are stealing from you when they're exiting, they've probably been stealing the whole time.
They've probably been stealing the whole time. And if you made the whole point of this process, and what people don't understand is by the time they're toxic, it's actually too late. Because what I'm talking about is moving a timetable back 9 months to when John first started to have a lot of work problems. And rather than having a real conversation, so the first quarter that John totally missed his sales quota, John, like, what's going on? Not you missed your quota, you have to do better. What's going on? You're like, I just don't know if sales are for me. Like, and if you have a real discussion. So if you don't know if sales are for you, John, then like maybe the sales team is not going to be the best place. Let's would you want to go back to marketing? Should we see if there's a job there? So yes, at the end of avoiding a lot of problems, you're at a point where it's unrecoverable. Part of this whole system is earlier warning system, conversations, dive in, there are much better outcomes earlier in the process before all this stuff goes on. When you missed it again, John, you missed earnings again. This is bad. Now you don't like me. I don't like you. We start doing stuff. Now you take the customer list and you copy it because maybe if I fire you one day, then you'll have the customer list. So this whole system requires pushing back. I call it kind of early detection system, 8 to 9 months. And as soon as problems start to arrive, starting discussions. Okay, John's coming they're different routes. John's coming into work totally late and distracted every day, right? So I can give you a performance review. I can be like, John, what's going on? You become super unreliable. So there's a couple stories that could be here. John actually is distracted and doesn't like the work and is looking for something else.
Yeah.
Number 2, John really doesn't like being in office and wants to work from home. And number 3, John lost his childcare and is working around this very short-term problem and it's very stressful.
Or has a family emergency or
what's
parent
super
that died
interesting
or any
is
number of things.
Instead of John, you're doing bad job at work, all of those require totally different remedies. The first one, maybe I can't fix, and so we start the John, should we get you another job? The schedule one, we can work on this in the short term, but here's what I need from you, and this is something that you need to fix. The work from home one, hey, like maybe we could set that up if that'll help you, but here are the expectations or whatever it is, or maybe it's the opposite. We're in office or we don't have offices and you want an office. So each different route would have a different course that we could try to take. Mm-hmm. And it's not about the performance is bad. It's can we help with what's the cause of the performance being bad? After the performance is bad, 3 quarters in a row, all of that other stuff doesn't matter anymore. And that's where you're at a sort of unsolvable impasse.
So there is these two, there's the employee who's decided they want to leave.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Then there's as the employer seeing performance. But it sounds like what you're talking about kind of addresses both scenarios.
I'm trying to make it no-fault car insurance, right? Basically. Like the Massachusetts is a no-fault state. It doesn't matter. It's to say, look, a transition, we're taking the word off of leaving. When everyone leaves under this, it is not clear to anyone how they left. Oh, John's moving on. He joins our alumni prop. Like transitioning is not a bad thing. Transitioning out is not a bad thing. So it's kind of like no fault. Ideally, you get the employees to opt in because they feel more in control and they're better. But it's the same thing on the other side where I'm trying to nudge you in and say, here's a solution. But it's no fault. Because what is everything about? I'm quitting. Were they fired or did they quit? Like it doesn't matter. It's run its course, right? It's like the sports contract where at the end of 3 years, I think you're a little slower. You want more money. You're free to sign with another team. Like it was a good run. Like it doesn't. We don't have to. It doesn't have to be a whose fault is it.
How many employees do you currently have in the company?
We have about 300. Although
Okay.
I'm exec chair, so I'm not involved in the day-to-day, running of the business anymore. But we have about 300.
How many did you have when you did this TED Talk and started to operationalize this?
That was probably 100.
Okay, so it's 100 people. So that's big. I've never. So this podcast.
No, it was. He was one of our first employees. So the TED Talk later, but we started to play around with this probably from 50.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So this podcast is a project of my organization, Emergent Order Foundation, and I've been an employer for, since I left Viacom in 2011.
Yeah.
The biggest I've ever had to manage as a team is about 25 to 30. And it does seem like there's these different points at which the nature of the thing changes. So
30 is a known number.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about what. We don't have to get too much into the weeds of like the different sizes of things and corporate culture stuff, but what was it like? What kind of company is 100 people?
Yeah.
Like, what did you have to do to make this impact the culture of the company? Because when you're a small enough group that I, as the boss, know everyone,
correct,
we can all get in a room together, talk about things, and if there's follow through, and if the people that report,
and it's I trust John or I don't trust John,
right? It's like, hey,
trusting John is more important than trusting the organization,
or the systems, or the programs, or this. It's a lot. It's more familial. But at 100, you're past that point.
Yeah.
Or even maybe at 50. So
every time you double your business, you break half your people and half your processes, right? That is a sort of a known thing. And 30 is the first time that an organization starts to need people that aren't doing the thing the organization does, right? So that is a key threshold. People either tend to plow through it or kind of stumble through it and then bounce back because they don't make the changes. So that's typically, if you have 20 people here, they're probably all writing and working on the podcast and doing stuff. You get above 30 and you have your first marketing person that just does marketing, your first HR person that's not doing what the business is doing. And as you get to 100, it lives through that middle. So this program, the 2 weeks notice program, lives and dies at the manager. It lives and dies at the manager's ability to have real conversations. And over the years, people would say, look, is the culture going to change as we grow? And is it going to, and I'm like, look, I don't want it to change or else I wouldn't come to work. But it's actually not going to be me. It's going to be how you are living that. You're touching those people on your team every day. So are you going to hold the own it and embrace relationships and excel and improve? Are you going to own the standards and carry it forward? It's not going to be up to me because you're listening to me and you're trusting in me, but they're trusting in you. So you have to be the one that's sort of living that out. So this stuff lives and dies on the front lines. And look, I do separate work with companies on their corporate core values, which has some very different things, but some very distinct things. And that, first of all, they also can't be trust and respect and integrity and all the crap you see when you walk in every company. But that also lives and dies in the operationalization. I worked with this well-known hospital that had a guy come in who I helped with the core values at his last organization where they had a mess. And he was walking into a mess, and he really wanted to do it for the department. And we spent a lot of work, and we talked to the people about what they actually valued and what was going on and what leadership was saying and they weren't doing. And it was total bottoms up. What do you value in your peers? What behaviors, do we need to elevate? And when we did it, and I checked in with them 4 months later, but I gave them a whole list on here's how it lives. Like you have it, and it doesn't matter if you say it. Like, and here's how it lives. And my favorite email I've gotten this year was I said, guys, how's it going? Like it's been 6 months. And they said, oh, thanks for writing. Here's what's going on. We just developed behavioral-based interview questions based on all of our core values for department. We got HR to approve that these core value kind of ratings are now part of the promotion assessment and comp assessment. We have this newsletter where they're now core value shout-outs that people submit from other people. We have our first core value awards that's going to come up in 6 months where people are going to nominate. We're going to give out awards. And I was like so happy. I was like, that's that's not integrity. They were this was a teaching hospital, interestingly, and there was sort of no value around elevating others and teaching others. And it was such an obvious thing.
I have a lot of problems with hospitals, so none of this surprises me, actually.
But it was an awesome, I'm like, you guys are making sure that, look, we're all animals a little bit at the end of the day. We're training a dog right now. We respond to incentives, whether they're explicit or implicit. What do I get a treat for, and what do I get a slap on the head for? So people will behave, and most organizations, the thing that's on the wall is not, look, when Enron went down in the height of their thing, they had trust, respect, integrity. You got promoted at Enron for taking egregious risks, like, being a go-getter, going at it alone. Like, those were probably actually the values. So people will respond to not what is on the wall, but what are you actually demonstrating that? What are you praising me for, giving me money for, scolding me if I don't do?
I have 3 lines of conversation where I feel like we could go. One is the collapse in trust in the corporate sector and business overall, in the public. Because some of this can sound a little like corporate HR gobbledygook to somebody who is struggling in the job market, or just feels like our culture, you go on social media, the way we talk about work and businesses and corporate culture is sort of like a disaster. It's like a disaster area in general. And then you have like this kind of guru talk that happens that, you're sort of either like, I'm in guru talk land with like Tony Robbins, or I'm like, work sucks and this is all horrible. And it's very hard to navigate when I try to put myself in the seat of a 20-something-year-old like my son, who's trying to look ahead for his future. And that's the second thing, is like, how is the workplace going to change? And how much of this is going to get very upended by stuff like AI? You're in your firm is in the digital marketing. So like every aspect of your business is subject to AI disruption. And then I guess maybe the third thing is I want to come back to sales, but let's just start with AI. AI is probably, if my son is in his 20s, he's going to school. He likes cognitive types of stuff, philosophy, political science, that kind of stuff. And what's he going to do 4 years from now, given the robots? So how are you dealing with this, and how does it impact everything?
Well, I have 2 kids in college. One is a senior. So, I talk about having the talk these days. It's the new talk, the AI talk. So my daughter, who's the oldest, we kind of talk about it regularly, and she's eyes wide open on it. She's actually interested in the law, and we've talked through which parts of the law are going to be, more impacted or not impacted, but it'll disproportionately impact junior work. Look, everyone wants to be a banker and a consultant, and we were joking, like, these are the ones where, there is, and they want to be a banker because they want to be in private equity, and private equity has had like no returns for the last 5 years. So, you got people plowing in on the demand side, and I think you're going to see a lot of funds close on the supply side. So it's all challenging. I think, the borrow whatever money and get whatever degree is, you'll be fine, is the same wisdom that fell apart would just go work in the factory and you'll be fine. The difference is these kids are a lot more levered and under a lot more debt. And again, I think they have
the social powder keg,
high expectations based on, where they're coming from. So I tend to be middle on a lot of these things. I'm not, everything's going to be robot. In fact, you look now, a lot of the companies are finding the ROI isn't there. There's a lot of complexity. They're rehiring the customer support people turns out people kind of want people but you got to know how to use it. It's going to be a major assistive thing, and you got to pay attention to certain shifts. Like I wouldn't tell my kid to be a copywriter, these days, or a copy editor. But I would focus on the creative pieces. I would focus on the interpersonal. So interestingly, like we were talking about in the law, so she had an internship at a law firm this summer on her own, maybe because of hopefully some of the value stuff we did, but she wrote 30 handwritten notes to every person that, she worked with, which is not something that, people do a lot these days. Now, there may be 20% less jobs in 3 years, at that firm, but are the people more likely to remember her that made a connection and reached out and did that and used the interpersonal skills and differentiated them? Like, I tend to think so, but I also think some of it, I have very different views on this, complicated probably as you do. Like some of it's kind of like expectations. And I actually think that we talked about the victim stuff, and some people have to come back to a very basic thing. No one owes you a job. No one gets up in the morning and says, I need to create work for other people. If you zoom back 300 years, your choices are you work the farm, or even earlier that, or you basically, forage for food. And even the introduction of, I can go work somewhere else that isn't the farm and they'll give me a paycheck was like a awesome choice, because the only choice was sort of the farm. So what's interesting is that people think that when people are doing massive layoffs, that's an evil and bad thing because it's something that already existed, right? We all have loss aversion. And I'm not in favor of layoffs or anything, but I'm just hold that for the other thing. However,
I know these are hard things for people to hear. It's like you cold bang.
However, if you were starting a company today, and when you get up to 100 people and you deal with their complexities and their problems and their mental health, you were starting a company and someone said, you can hire 5 people to do that thing or have a machine that does it. 100 out of 100 people are probably going to buy the machine. So in the creation of a company, the purpose isn't to find work for other people. So I think people a little bit of lose sight of this. And you should believe that if someone else is running their company in most cases, even though I believe in culture and equity and all of these things, but I'm just talking about basic human nature, they're going to optimize for themselves and their interest and their family. So I think there's this expectation problem, which is if you go work at a big company or another thing, it's not your company, it's someone else's company. It's a great place to learn, but you got to understand that. Again, your options are today, be self-sustaining, do the farm thing, go work for someone else, go do your own thing if you want to do it better. But if you resign yourself to, I'm not going to be self-sustaining, I'm not going to start my own thing, I'm going to go work for someone else's thing, that inherently has certain limits. I think if we were just a little more honest with ourselves around that and our expectations, and I'll say all that at the same time where I think if you're running a company, you should treat people well and pay them well, and I believe in good cultures and all that stuff. But I think it's interesting that the downsizing argument because of technology gets people that's amoral. But is anyone talking about, if you're starting a company, is it amoral not to hire people in the first place?
Well, this really cuts, and we don't have to get into political philosophy too deeply, but I came into this world doing this kind of thing because I was interested in economics and in the aftermath of the financial crisis. Yeah. And Occupy Wall Street, I think, represented the reawakening of this fundamentally interested interest in socialism.
Yeah.
And a lot of what you're talking about do you have a right to a job? It butts right up against the kind of arguments being made increasingly by those who are not a small number of people who say they're kind of anti-capitalism and pro-socialism.
Yeah.
Which
I understand but disagree with. And I understand when a system is broken, it's very logical to say that the system doesn't work and try another one. The problem is they can't find a working example of that in history, and that all of the people from all of those regimes are trying to get into our country as fast as they can.
Right. There's a whole bunch of without litigating capitalism versus socialism inside our conversation.
Look, anything at an extreme any ism is a problem. I'm not a pro-capitalist, full extreme. Although it's interesting,
I kind of am, but that's okay.
No, but some of the people I actually think are interesting. Some of the problems with our capitalism in the last 10 or 20 years has not been pure. We have not let people fail and go, and people have used influence to get bail. It has not, it actually has been rigged, like a little bit.
It's, I actually think that this failure to understand what we are and therefore what the roots of our problems are seems just maybe one of the most profound problems in our politics, and our politics about our economics. It's like, I just remember this again, going back to the financial crisis. The economists, people like Joseph Stiglitz, who are going out there saying the problem with this is our laissez-faire banking system. And it's like, last time I checked, like, finance is the most regulated industry.
Yeah.
And like has all these weird things, including a central bank that bails them out. Like, what part of that is laissez-faire? It's not. So then, like, when you start from, and this kind of comes back to what you're saying, when you start from faulty assumptions, you sort of can't help but end up in faulty next steps. Like,
if someone owes you a job is not a thought someone would have had 300 years ago. So you just have to understand that, right? You didn't wake up in the world, in the fields and thing, and someone owed you a job. It was, you got to go get the food or do whatever you need to do to do. And again, when I talk about, if you were starting a company today, do you have a mandate to hire people? Or if I told you I had a machine or a system that'll do it cheaper and it won't call in sick and whatever, like 99 out of 100 people are going to pick that. And look, there are so many problems with all of these things, but we go way down this.
I think one of the things that, as I'm thinking about for my own children and also just philosophically and how to talk about this stuff here, is this sort of goes to the second thing about sales. Everyone's worried about the robots taking all of our jobs, and we're going to have a universal basic income, and it's basically going to be a brave new world. It's like that future sucks.
People need to work is strongly tied to pride and self-respect, and even if the economic right thing is to get a check, like sitting around and getting a check and having no meaning or purpose is going to cause a whole set of other problems.
No, and it's like acutely true for men who've being out of work causes these very steep declines in mental and then physical health. It's just, even just the amount of people who retire and then quickly die.
Right, in the first 6 months, yeah.
So it's like, we like work, we like being useful to other people. Forget work, job. It's like,
correct.
Being useful to another person is deeply fulfilling. One of the jobs that I basically never hear talked about, and I know it's easy to always say always or never, but I really think this might be never. I think it might be never, is sales. So we talk about all these jobs. What should our kids do? Or be an entrepreneur or go into the trades. Yeah. Like, every kid is going to want to end up.
It's true. Marketing's talked a lot about more than sales. Yeah.
Nobody in the spaces talking about the future of work ever talks about sales. And I want to talk about it. When I was preparing for this, I was like,
let's talk about it.
Well, because I actually think, and I want this to be the start of a conversation I come back to. Because sales is like super important. Like, sales is actually the only reason why anything exists. Like, you need to sell your product. Like, if you have a business, you're selling a product or service, it needs to get sold.
It's funny. There are people who have some sort of, martyr's not the right word, but look, I've been in customer acquisition my whole life and marketing. Like, it doesn't care. If you have the best product, you tell me, well, that firm has a much better product. That firm in St. Louis has the amazing product, but no one knows about them. Well, then what does it matter? Like, the people are using the product that they know about, right? So like, it does. There's no like arbiter of the universe that says because you're better and sitting there in your closet that all of the business should come to you.
Betamax is so much better technically than VHS. It's got higher color resolution. It's more reliable. Didn't matter.
Yeah. And if you have a high charisma kid who's good at relationships, and you say, hey, you have natural sales skills, right?
What I'm probably partly informed by having been functionally in sales as an entrepreneur for a long
Every
time.
entrepreneur is in sales.
But that's the other piece of it. So we have this world. I was watching a video this morning from a guy, I forget the name of the guy, but he was talking about like what the future work's going to be like with AI. And he was saying basically be an entrepreneur in information with media, IP, something or other. But I only understand being an entrepreneur as first and foremost being sales. So how do you understand sales as someone who's built and run a company that has to sell its services to people on an ongoing basis? Give our viewers the breakdown from your perspective on what sales is and why it might be a career that they should put on their radar, because no one's talking about it and no one's offering it to them as, hey, you might be good in sales.
Yeah, so it's actually be good to talk about sales and marketing as a pair, because I think, particularly if you're younger, you might not understand the distinction. So marketing is kind of the creation and formation of demand. I think any 16-year-old intuitively understands that when they go through Instagram and suddenly want to buy something that they never knew existed, right? That is a creation of demand. And sales sort of partners with that. And that is, how do we match up our product and solution and let you know that it's the right fit? And it is probably one of the more important and highly compensated functions in any organization. Mm-hmm. In most startups, the salesperson is paid more than the CEO or mid-size companies. And if you build a pyramid and get on top of that and manage sales, I mean, it's a good career. And it's very good for people who are either persuasive or expert. They have to be, actually, some of the best salespeople are good listeners, make a product fit. So marketing kind of creates that demand and then it hands it over to sales. Or typically if someone calls into the company, then you're not really in the purview of marketing. You're then, talking to sales. But this is the thing, like everyone's like doctor, lawyer, banker, like there's a lot more range out there, a lot more things you can do and tie it to that. It's just the culture just reinforces a few of these stories. And I think there are a lot of kids out there. I have one kid who he has sales DNA. Like I joke, they'd be if my kids formed a company, they'd probably kill each other in the process. But a kind of executive, one is executive, one is sort of operational and financial, and the other is sales. They'd have a good,
they have
totally different, DNA. In that, my other son would hate to sell anything to anyone. Like it's just not his thing.
So what is it? What is sales DNA? What does it take? What could be early indicators that you should be thinking about a job in sales? Which, by the way, also means you could potentially pick almost any field.
Any field, because you could apply it to. Look, you love golf. You can go work for Nike and sell golf clubs to golf club stores, and that sounds pretty freaking fun, right? Like, let's go out on the golf course and try it out, and yeah. So look, the DISC profile, like DSC,
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it almost
one of these sort of personality tests.
Yeah, it almost totally correlates to executive functions sometimes. Like a C would end up usually being your CFO or your ops person. The Ds tend to be your GMs.
Do you remember what DISC stands for?
Dominant, influencing, steady, and conscientious, I think.
Yeah.
So your salespeople are usually like straight I, influencing. So this is someone who likes people, gift of the gab, like good persuader, good listener, extroverted, likes being in rooms of people, likes being in events, gets their energy from other people, likes a challenge, likes salespeople tend to be a little more coin operated, right? They like the close the deal, get the money in the bank. Yeah,
I love.
Every
I didn't
entrepreneur
realize
has an element of that.
Yeah, I didn't realize this about myself, actually, that I actually loved closing the deal, like making the pitch and having the win and being like it was.
You're a solutions provider and you're helping people solve their problems. And as you said, I think that is very astute. There's not an industry that doesn't need it. So if you studied medicine, you could go into pharma sales, very lucrative. There's sports sales. There's digital technology sales, there's AI sales. And again, generally, interestingly, these aren't the kids that went to Harvard or Yale or whatever, but they're making more money than those kids in a lot of cases, making a lot of money, because I think it's the people a little bit with a chip on their shoulder. And again, we've assigned this artificial prestige to certain things and not things, but that could flip so fast. Like there's a version of AI where like being able to do woodworking and do stuff with your hands will be a lot more demand with than being able to do a spreadsheet. And that may flip a lot of these things, really quickly.
There's this movie called The Founder. Have you seen this movie?
No.
It's about the founding of McDonald's. And
I've read the book on this, so it's super interesting.
The brothers that started the original McDonald's burger shop as a single standalone place had innovated all this stuff that made it efficient, the kind of assembly line inside the store. And then along comes Ray Kroc.
People know he wasn't the founder. I talked to a franchising guy who said, I look for the Picassos that I can go stamp out. And he saw this and he was like, no one's doing this.
Yeah. Right? And the funny thing about the film is I think the filmmaker probably has kind of an anti-capitalist streak, but it's almost like a Rorschach test, because I'm watching this and there's all these things that happen in this movie that are great. One of which is, so Kroc goes out and he's trying to franchise these McDonald's and replicate them.
He was a sales guy.
He's a sales guy.
He is sales to, yeah.
And one of the things, at least as it's portrayed in the movie, but this tracks, because actually my father-in-law is a Burger King franchisee, so I have some exposure to these crowds. My wife and I used to go every year. Like, I think I met her mother at like the Burger King Franchise Association like gala thing that they would do in Florida. So I've been around these folks for a long time. Yeah. The movie shows the first place he goes to try to find people to start these franchises is actually the country club, because they have money and they could like capitalize and start these things. Totally fails. These people aren't in the business. They're basically hiring schlubs, and they don't adhere to the standards. And the people he ends up finding that do it well are like these like Eastern European immigrants and these people who are working class, kind of like my great-grandparents types, who have that grit and want to get it done.
Get up at 6 a.m. in the morning.
And take ownership of it. And they're working class people. They're not like the elite. They're not the cultural elite. They're like the outsiders. And this is the funny thing about this, is like, having gone to these Burger King conventions for like 20 years, that's who these guys are. Guys and gals, mostly guys though. And they make way more money than the kid that goes and works for McKinsey and then gets burned out in 2 years and has a crisis and is like, whatever.
And this is
like, they have boats, they're living large.
I know.
They're having a great life.
This is the unsexy cash flow businesses too. The guy who fixes all the screens in North America. And I had a conversation with someone 2 weeks ago, first generation immigrant, very senior banking position in New York. Kids went to really good schools. They were not working. And she was sort of lamenting their work ethic and their viewpoint while also saying it was her fault, basically, and that she had just made it too easy. I can't tell you the number of people I know, business owners, whatever, who grew up dirt poor, struggled, paid for their first car. I was guy that I'm working with had the same discussion. Like he had nothing, and now he's like so off. And to where we were like a little while ago on this, and they just can't or won't give any of their kids a little bit of that, knowing that that was basically their key to success. And they're like, well, I bought them the car and I get, so all the stuff that you never had and wouldn't do and that made you who you are. And they just do the opposite with their kids. It's just super interesting, right? And ironically, maybe the kids of these people you're talking about end up then being the ones going to the tracks and I'm not going to do that. That's like the family. I want to be in finance or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's it is funny because there's like there's just not a lot of guidance out there for the young person who is struggling in this way, or like it's very hard. And like the biggest thing to me is the robots haven't taken all of our jobs yet. No. We don't know what that's going to look like, really. Like, no one knows. And it's easy to just get yourself into like
Yeah, they may
get
start
lost.
taking over, and we have to shut them all down, right? But don't you think that the parents are just not? This is a failure to have these meaningful and like you need to have these conversations with the kids. I think telling your kids it's all going to be all right and you're special and you're amazing and whatever is a huge disservice. Me having these honest conversations with my daughter about what's going on doesn't take anything away from that. I think she's super smart and has worked hard and all this stuff. But I think a lot of this stuff is where are the parents in these conversations talking about their roots and their values and the things they want the kids to carry forward. They're all caught up in the achievement game.
What there's talk and there's action, and one of the things about parenting and I'm a talker, so there's that. But I think one of the things that we usually overlook is just how much our kids' lesson comes from what they observe us doing. How do you think?
Another leadership truism too? I do what you say, not what you do, not what you say.
Well, how what's your advice for that? How have you tried to balance talk and action? Because sometimes talk is just cheap, and sometimes it's hard to like get it to stick and be a thing. Like we can talk about our values, but it's in one ear and out the other.
Look, here's a simple thing. I don't pay for lattes. Like, I do not pay for my teenage kids. I don't go buy Starbucks for $6, every day. So I bought an espresso machine. I bought a bunch of the pods and the stuff. I'm like, if you guys want to make it, they're $1 each. That's at home. You can make it. If you want to do your own Starbucks, like it's on you, and you guys don't make enough money for that. So I hate wasteful things. So there's a perfect example, and I'm using it intentionally that it's trivial, but you can just keep saying that's a waste of money and you shouldn't do that. But someone yesterday was telling me, yeah, that's ridiculous and whatever. And then the wife was like, she has a Starbucks card app that we give her. Like, so you're full of like she's 10 years old and has the Starbucks app, and you're saying it's ridiculous. So you lose it with your kids. I mean, I'm like, I don't go buy $6 coffees, and I can afford $6 coffees. You can't. So that's just a very small thing, but I think you have to, even with these little things. There's a book our financial advisor gave us years ago called Raised Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's basically a study of these really well-adjusted kids who grew up from super affluent parents. And a lot of them are artists and things that have nothing to do with the business. And there's a lot of themes in the book, but one of the main things I took was these kids remembered deeply, and they didn't know at the time how much money their parents had, but they remembered them saying, that's not worth it, or we wouldn't pay something for like that, or shopping through the sale rack, or bringing the coupon. They remembered like how their parents valued money before they realized how much money they had, and realized, oh, they could have done all of that stuff, but they didn't. And that was a huge determinant in these kids being kind of well-adjusted. So yeah, look, you have to, sometimes it's a little thing like a coffee machine or whatever, but I think you have to make sure that some of they're just going to do what you're doing.
One of the things you talk about and write about is bringing shared values to your relationship. So we've been talking about our kids and parenting, but that starts with your spouse, And so and I think this is something that worries me a lot. I think it worries all of us that look at it, that have managed to get on the last chopper out of Nam, which is like they're our kids, and 20-somethings into 30s for that matter are facing like an absolutely bizarre, to me as a Gen Xer, like dating market, like the relationship landscape.
Yeah, the boys are all conservative, the girls are all liberal, and they don't want to talk to each other.
Oh, well, so there's that. Well, I've talked about that. Yeah, for sure. There's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you got the boys are all like right wingers, and this played out for sure with my son. And the girls have all gotten woke, and they're all
Yeah, and it's like the first litmus test.
And actually, the funny thing is, when you look at that data, the boys actually haven't changed that much. They're a little more conservative.
Yeah.
The girls have changed a lot. They've gotten way more left wing.
So the thing you want to be is a liberal boy or a conservative girl if you want to play supply and demand. Is basically what I saw. Yeah.
Well, if you want to play supply and demand and be mentally healthy, I suggest maybe being a Christian conservative girl. But I'll leave that up to the viewer.
Yeah.
But this values, talk about how you try to bring values to discerning your relationships and having a healthy relationship. Like, what does that mean for you?
That means, look, values are about the big decisions. And I don't think I understood this in my 20s. I think that people look at relationship compatibility or they hear me say, do you have to be the same? Like, no, in fact, I've been in a lot of these personality things in DISC, and people tend to marry the opposite. Because there's some, and I remember the woman had everyone line up in the room, and the spouse was in the opposite quadrant in one of these things. And look, long term, there's a harmony in that. And she said people marry the opposite and they cheat with the same, which I thought was really interesting because she said when you get frustrated, it's easy to run to the same thing as you, but that has a whole different set of problems in the long run, which I thought was super interesting that she pointed that out. So you have different personalities, you have different activities, but when you start talking about where we're going to live and what are the values we want to impart to our, kids and what decisions are we going to make, for them, you have to have values alignment. And look, some values are ostensibly good or bad, like honesty and not honesty, but so many of these things are deeply powerful. And if you are really conflicting on those, it's going to be hard. So, let's do a couple examples. I recently did helping someone in a work context figure out their core values. I figured out two of her core values, and she had this kind of look on her face. And I was like, and she's going for a divorce. She was like, what? And she's like, my ex is the opposite of those two. And I was like, that's not a surprise. Like, again, we don't have to be identical here. We have to be symbiotic. Well, we can't be as opposite. So let's say I grew up super poor and, because of that, and I never had money for tomorrow. And because of that, like I am a saver and I am a core value of long-term orientation. This isn't my origin story.
Yeah.
So I am about long-term and thinking ahead and whatever. This is borrowed from a true story that I heard recently about someone whose parent thought that they were going to, was told that they had basically a year to live and then live 5 years. And so for her, there was no tomorrow, right? So we're married and she is about today and let's spend it all today and present. And I am about save and future. Like we can maybe navigate around that. If we have 3 or 4 of those, that's hard. It means we wake up every day and we orient ourselves not around you're playing tennis and I like soccer and maybe we could agree that we both like pickleball. This is very baked in for us. It's very opposite. And I think that's a really hard thing to overcome. And so then, but what value are we teaching our kids? Well, let's teach them to defer gratification. No, teach them to do it all today. Yeah, carpe diem. Like, and there's such a reaction and overreaction. So in values, I have found I've gotten a lot of adults in a work setting to get pretty vulnerable with me. If they're willing to do it, I'm like, I'm not a therapist. I'm trying to understand where this came from because it's very real for you as a 40-year-old in the workplace and it's driving your leadership behavior. We're not going to go back. We're not going to litigate it. We're not going to be a victim. But like, you have to know where it came from, why it's so strong for you. Most values, say 30% are in the 4. Hey, we had a strong religious, background in our family that was important to me. That was a backbone. Like I believe in that. Others are for the against. Hey, I had a strong religious background in my family. I was not a kid who was accepted some of my thing in that religion, and I do not believe in that at all. And I do the opposite of that. And I'm a free thinking sort of person. So this woman came up to me after I spoke on this, and she said, and I didn't know what it was. She said, my son and I are diametrically opposed on this value. And I just realized it's really hard for me. I was like, yeah, that is hard. And I didn't get into it with her because there was a lot of emotion. But what I can imagine is this thing was so, you just don't know how it lands for someone else and the kid and who's the kid. This was so important to her, maybe because she didn't have it. And so she over-indexed it, maybe onto a point where her son was like, I don't want this in my life. This is the like ping pong game that goes on around. Again, I've probably seen more people going against one. I did this exercise with a forum that I work with, and one of the people has a family business, and he realized that like all of his core values were basically opposite things in this family business world that he just like he grew up in that, and they were just things that he was trying to do the opposite of something because it didn't land for him or it didn't work for him or otherwise. So that's the struggle, that they're deep and that they're real. And so it's totally understandable why that person is carpe diem. They dealt with 10 years where there wasn't another day. But when that collides into person who does not want to live for the day, like you've got some problems.
Before we started rolling, I was bringing up Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind. Yeah. And in that, he lays out what he calls his moral foundations sort of framework. Yeah. And I'm not going to remember them probably all, but they're like, they're in tension because it's essentially like an idea and its opposite. So liberty versus oppression, or care versus harm, sanctity versus disgust or disrespect, loyalty versus disloyalty, I guess. Those are several of them. There was some others. And in that book, among other things, this is his framework that strike me as being like, those feel like those are very core values. Yeah. How do you think about, do you have a rubric or way of like, what are values? Because we use this word, values, virtues.
Yeah. So values are your non-negotiables, like in life. And historically, people have been willing to die for them. So they're non-negotiable. They're consistent, right, in all areas of your life, spectrum, family, personal, work. They're clarifying for you. They help make decisions. But that's why one-word values can't meet any of these tests, right? So when I have someone and they have a value of include all perspectives, that's actually meets all of my kind of validation standards. And I actually know if that person's on my team, I know exactly the type of project they would want to do. Hey, I need to go talk to all of our customers, figure out what product features that we're, missing, come back to me with what we should build in a time frame. And they'll be like, I'm on it, right? I was like, hey, I need you to go talk to one or two people and then make a unilateral decision on this, without consulting everyone, and do it quickly because it needs to be made. They're going to be like, I do not want to do that, right? So that's what they are. Look, what he's talking about, there are societal values, there's family values. Again, you can grow up in a really religious household that has those values, but every kid's different. And for me, the creative stuff, being told, sit down and follow the rules, that had an imprint on me, right? The same thing, because of different personalities and different kids can imprint differently, but that imprint carries forward. And my friend Phil McKernan says, and this is why we're not going to litigate it, we're not going to go back, I'm not a therapist, but he goes, our purpose and pain for most people lie really close together. There's a story in the book about when the mentor sort of explaining this, why you need to look back and understand these things. And he says, look, imagine that I know a woman, and she came from a single family household, and her mom worked 2 jobs to get her through school and worked her butt off 12 hours a day and got the kid into school, and the kid went to Harvard and they graduated and they were top of their class, and they ended up becoming an entrepreneur and starting an award-winning global after-school care program. Well, what was the reason for that? They were lonely as a kid. Their mom was gone a lot. They were alone after school. They were with friends, and they didn't want them to have that. Now, we're not blaming the mom, right? That's person I hate. I don't like this term and how it's used, but it's their lived experience, right, in this context. And it produced a purpose and a really good outcome. But it was just, and you'd say, that's a great parent. They worked really hard and they couldn't do everything. Right. But that was just the reality for that person. And so for them, they became very motivated to build connection and communities. And so I think for most people, our purpose lies close to pain. The question is, are we running around with no self-awareness around that, or do we understand how it shows up in our leadership and in our style? Like, because that person in the workplace is going to be very focused on where they can create connection and community, and is not going to react well to people who isolate people or who do stuff.
The thinking about values as things you die for and that are consistent is really powerful. And I'm just thinking about one of the things that I think has become so difficult in America is I think we have, not just America, I think the West, maybe just the whole world. Maybe it's always a human problem, but it feels
Earth.
like
We'll go with Earth to cover
it's
it.
definitely an Earth. It's definitely a human Earth thing, but
maybe
right
the
now,
aliens too. Yeah.
yeah, those wheels flying around the air. I think what should and shouldn't be part of your identity is something that I think about, because how you respond to someone that has a very different perspective than you seems like it's hard for us, right?
Right.
We're in this politics is polarizing. Families are getting ripped apart by politics.
But what's the interesting is the why, because I think the why behind that is we are using a very old thing that was designed to protect us 1,000 years ago, which is we are tribalistic, right? And our DNA is, if you get put out of the cave in your group 1,000 years ago, you're dead. And now, instead of having consistent values, this tribalistic team sport, what's my team doing? And I'm actually watching teenagers and 20-year-olds being completely manipulated by people who would do them harm and don't have their best interest in heart into accepting illogical things that don't make any sense. And that if you actually had grounding in your values, for example, like, let's not make this political, but let's say there's a group that says, look, we love all people except purple people, right? And you would be like, but that doesn't make sense. Either we love all people or we don't. Why are we against the purple people, right? But unless you're rooted enough in your values to be consistent around that, you are not gonna, your values always cost you something in the short term. Usually you win out in the long run, but I say you don't get credit when you make a values-based decision and your boat and the river are going in the same direction. You get credit when you point the boat uphill, and it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you money, friends, jobs, socialization, but to be in congruence. I'm sure have you read Adam's book, Grant's book, Originals?
No, I'll have to check it out.
So one of the studies he did in that was, why did non-Jews in Europe harbor Jews during the Holocaust and put their life at risk to hide them?
Like Schindler, for example.
Yeah, or why did families who put their life at risk? And so they interviewed all these people to try to figure out, like, what was the common thread? And the common thread was basically like, when we were kids, my parents told us, you take care of all people. Like, and so obviously, like, this was just, the values were super clear to them. It didn't matter who it was. It was, these are people that need to be taken care of, and it's the right thing to do, and we're going to do it, and we didn't think about it twice. It was a complete transmission of values story as to why they acted that way. That situation hadn't happened before. There weren't any rules. So what I see right now is super short routes everywhere. People, even we have a real life thing going on today with all this Tylenol stuff, right? And I saw a doctor today say, we should be talking about whether Tylenol is safe, not who said what or which team, or like we're losing the plot. Like, let's have, like, is it safe or is it not safe? Like, but now it's so much these days, who said it? Oh, he said it, I agree with it. Even if I agree with it because I think I'm on that team, even if it goes against everything I've said in a different context. To me, that is like being so lost in your values that you don't even know where center is for you.
Well, this is the there was one of the values you listed, I think it was the last one. I'm trying to remember, but it was about basically being authentic without
respectful authenticity.
And this kind of cuts to that in a way, because one of the things that I think is happening is we have gone through what I think can properly be understood as a second wave of political correctness in this country. The first being basically in the 90s.
Yeah.
With like multiculturalism. I was in college at the time, and I remember that. I remember it being and then it kind of died, and then it came back in a vengeance in the form of this woke stuff. And I think we are facing the like resurgence of like, I can say whatever I want and be authentic. And if you're inclined towards that, or if you're like capable of it, some people just don't want to put their neck out, and it's understandable. But if you are, you can sort of score points by being authentic, even being authentic in a way that's politically incorrect. The respectful part is interesting because it cuts in the other way. We're
The more incendiary you are, the more the algorithms value you.
Yeah, and like, so this is, I'm curious, you have a couple different perspectives on this. One, as somebody who's got a digital marketing firm, you understand the way these platforms work, the way the digital landscape works, how to navigate it for purposes.
Yeah.
As a parent, you've got your kids who are living in this digital world. And then as somebody that's out there trying to talk about values, you got it. How do you think about that respectful authenticity? What does that mean? What does that mean? Like,
so how can that help
us? How can that help us?
Look, again, this is personal to me. It's how it's always been. Your values shouldn't be aspirational. They be, I've always hated people that are disrespectful. Actually, like, frustrated with kids' friends and stuff. If they had disrespect, it just like, that's the blood boiling part for me. But I'm the person people call when they want to hear the truth. Not, like, tell me the story that I want to hear. Like, didn't I make the right decision? I'm like, you want me to tell you what you want to hear, or you want me to tell you the truth? But I've always appreciated this balance of being direct and telling people the truth. And I don't like I like authenticity. Authenticity to me is what in your head matching the words that you're saying and the things that you're doing. Because I can appreciate people who do totally different things, like, but they're both authentic, but they're consistent, right? But there's so many people who think one thing and say another. I'll disagree with you a little bit, and I don't think people are rewarded for authenticity now. I think the algorithm actually encourages the opposite for a lot of people, which is I've seen some people get incredible prominence now because I think they've realized that certain hateful, incendiary things get more likes. And so what are our kids trained on? If I post the real authentic thing and no one likes it, like, I feel empty, right? It's got to be enough that I said, versus I've noticed that if I start saying some stuff that there's some people right now that have had such shifts in 3 or 4 years. If you go back, like, they're not even the same person. And I'm like, did they change, or did they realize this makes a lot more money, in what they believe in? So again, that's just for me that's basically what the 2 weeks notice program was. Like, where are opportunities, to be authentic, but be respectful and have, like a lot of we're talking about here, like these are hard, complicated conversations, but we shouldn't beat around them. But that's true for me. It may not be for other people. Well, but when people say they have a value of integrity, it's one of value and integrity and family are my two most common one-word values that I don't really like because I don't think they help you. And I think there's something deeper beneath both of those that people mean. But I'm like, what do you mean by integrity? Like, again, my version is I like people who think something, say something, and do the same thing. Like, that's different than telling the truth or not telling the truth.
I mean, that's a good way to describe integrity, because even in the physical sense, right? When we think about something as physical integrity, it's like marble that you cut and it's marble all the way through.
Yeah.
Or the difference between gold and gold plated.
Yeah.
I think the thing I'm grappling with or groping at is this. I have found for myself that the ego gets involved all the time.
Oh.
Right? And I can kind of tell that when Actually, let's come back to a good example. I've had to do this a couple times, so I think I can tell this in a way that's stylized and doesn't point towards any one particular person. When I have had to let someone go in the organization over the past since 2011 of being an actual employer, where it's like
this isn't working,
and it's like my job, and it's like I have to pay you, or I have to stop paying you. It's really painful and really difficult, and it's a decision that you kind of have to make, and that I've had to learn how to make in a way where I have to try to be like true. It has to be true. I have to not let my emotions and also my desire to protect myself from the discomfort of doing it, because that's actually been the bias I've had. It's actually been hard to do.
I know you didn't see it, but I wrote an article on this recently, and I named it Relational Dissonance, because we can't handle cognitive dissonance. So I like James. James is not doing well in his job. So I have to start, and I know I have to fire James. So what does my brain do to solve that? It starts making James into the bad guy. So now it brings these, James is lazy, James missed the thing. So now I basically make it easier to do that, versus what I really should do, and this is from the two, is the opposite. I should be like, I like James a lot, but he's objectively not good at his job, right? We do the cameras off every third time that we're doing this, and like, you can't be a cameraman if you can't remember how to turn on the camera. It's just not in the right field. Again, the thing would be to lean into the relationship. Like, James, love you, man, but like, this isn't working out. We need to figure out something. But we all struggle with that first thing, because we don't want to do a bad thing to a nice person. If you hate the person, they're assholes. It's easy, right?
Well, I think it's like, but it's also the selfish part, the selfish part of not wanting to have to do the thing that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm a good guy, so I wouldn't do a bad thing.
Like, but I think we encounter this a lot in our life. We encounter it all the time. We have to make these decisions and how to present ourselves and how to talk about things and choices to make. And I feel like, on one hand, the values you're talking about, these values you would die for, if that's not fundamental to who you are, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
In another sense, I feel like a lot of people have made too many things that shouldn't be taken personal, especially in the political. Yeah. And so you end up in this world where, if I disagree with you, I have embedded my sense of my politics or whatever. Pick the issue. But I'll use politics broadly. It's like, I can't like you anymore. I can't engage you. You're my enemy. And it's like, it's personal for you. It's become the political becomes the personal. And this is kind of wrapped up in values, that it isn't like easy. It's easy to say we shouldn't do that. It's hard to execute.
But it's like, what is so I look at this in parenting. I'm like, look, if you can have these values with your kids, and I always say, like, what I try to do with my kids, there's a lot of things that they can do that would piss me off that aren't actually violations of my values. If I get upset about everything to the same degree, they won't know the difference. So I get really upset when there is a thing of disrespect or non-resilience or non-healthy. And the other stuff, I have to learn to sort of blow it up. I kind of think this is sort of the problem, right? When you make everything something, maybe it is a values issue for some people. Maybe it is, I can't talk to you because you just don't tell the truth. And that's like a value for me. But I think for a lot of people, if they could connect to the values a little bit, they could decide that this other stuff just isn't worth the angst and the animosity and all the team sports and all that stuff. And look, we've talked a lot about the values, but we should spend some time all like, okay, so how do I figure them out?
Yeah.
Like, and it starts with in the book, and obviously there's the book and the course, and that's great. People get that, but there are these 6 questions that people, could answer, and they always want the notes. And so I just put them at robertglazer.com/6 if you want the questions.
Yeah, I've got them right in front of me, but let's go through them.
They're right there. And so first, like, you gotta, like, if you want to test drive this, you gotta kind of start to see, what your values are. So the most interesting thing, we'll run this experiment with you.
Sure.
One of the greatest tests of a value for me, and I had this hysterical epiphanous breakout on a different interview last week, which I'll explain if we have time, but the anti-value test is so interesting for people because the violation of a value should be like physically annoying or uncomfortable. So I asked this guy, I'll ask you the same too. So what is the sort of a question, what is something about a person or a behavior or whatever that drives you absolutely crazy?
Me?
Yeah.
This one's pretty easy.
And I'm sure you're picturing probably an actual story in your
Well, and I rag on my older son for this the most, but I get it, but everybody here knows it. I mean, at some level you could say like low conscientiousness, like not paying attention to the details.
Yeah.
Like if I say, please clean the kitchen, and I come back and the pot is still sitting there on the range, it drives me absolutely crazy. It drives me crazy. If there's execution stuff on video and it's like there's errors, and it's not like I fly off the handle on this stuff, but if it's repeated, it's like, nah, this isn't working. Like doing things right. Like do it the right, if you're going to do it the right way. Don't half-ass it. Half-assing stuff drives me up a wall.
So is it there's a bunch in there, but see how your physiology as you got to the end of that is. And then you said half-ass it, and you're like, really locked in there. So if you think about what is it about someone doing it correctly? Is it about listening? Is it about the conscientiousness? Which one of those sort of tracks was the more of, sort of track? Like what was the most, because you said a few different things in there.
I mean,
is it sort of like, if you're going to do it well?
I think it's like, yeah, let me think about this for a second.
Half-assing it was your closest emotion there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'd say is this. I'm very tolerant of somebody making mistakes. A mistake is when you try and you get it wrong, but you were trying and you were putting in the effort. When you simply didn't do it, and it looks like it's just failing to put in the effort necessary to complete the job correctly, it feels fundamentally disrespectful. It's like you don't care enough about this to do it right. There's a bunch of. It's
about doing it right, or is it not even trying? Because it's an interesting. And we may be tapping into two different values.
Yeah, it points towards, for me, it points towards a bunch of stuff that's, but it is commitment.
Yeah,
it's commitment to.
Lack of effort is your kryptonite.
I just can't. It's like, and some people are like, it just depends. It depends on what it is. But fundamentally, like, if you got to clean your room, I want to see that room is really clean.
Yeah.
And then if it's repeatedly not clean, then it's like this. Why won't you do? Like, I kind of take it personally.
Like, like if you're going to do it well. Is that the value?
I mean, actually, we did this exercise because Mateo's school acting had us do these family things.
And like you're Bill Belichick, like do your job.
Yeah, it was like our family slogan was the Popola family does things right, and the doing them right.
Yeah.
Some people say, "Oh, we do hard things." It's like, no, I want it done right.
All right, so it's funny. So you probably are a right way. Y person, which is similar to my wife, and that generally people with that orientation, you cannot get them to accept anything that they don't believe is right. They're willing to change their mind, but you cannot force them onto it. They have to believe it is the right thing, or they inherently uncomfortable. Yeah. So now I'll ask you, I'll test this. So I think back, like, childhood, growing up, or whatever, is this a for or against thing? Like, is this like, someone?
This is for. So my dad is a surgeon, and my dad lives this value of doing things right and raised me in it. He soaked me in it. So as a surgeon, and a good one. And I say good one because, like, anytime a patient would approach us throughout my growing up, ear, nose, and throat surgeon. He was constantly getting approached by grateful patients. So that's one of the ways I knew. And he has great bedside manner. But here's a perfect example. The way my dad said to study is read the first chapter, then read the first and second, then read the first, second, and third, then read the first, second, third, fourth. He is like conscientiousness incarnate. He's more conscientious than anyone I know, including myself. But I love my dad. He's my hero. And so he is the do it right. He is the, okay, we're going to do this. When he gives instructions for how to go somewhere, he tells you which lane to be in at what time.
So look, this is very personal to me and Rachel to work with. So here's what I found, again, with someone with that. You're the type of person that I would really want to make the unplug or plug the machine, or the big thoughtful decisions. You also will bring that entire apparatus to pizza versus Chinese food, where it is like a bazooka to a gunfight, in terms of when there's a really small decision and there's not really a wrong thing, it becomes an over, analysis.
The way I've accounted for that in general is, and I found this to be true even in like the edit room.
Yeah.
If I'm in the room, I'm going to end up taking charge. So I don't go into the room until everyone knows, like, I'm going to come in the room and I'm going to do my thing and I'm going to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
But I'm perfectly happy. Go do it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good self-awareness. And again, if you're leading in the workplace and you understand that that's a value, what you'd want to do is go to a team like, look, it's really important to me that things are right. So if you are unsure or you need more information, I would rather you ask me than not ask me. Like, I generally think that the moral thing to do is the better thing to do. This is when so here's one I've seen a lot. People who have a real core value of trust. It is almost 99% a negative against thing. Because when I ask someone, an adult, hey, and here's the test, because you'll say to someone, well, I'm hearing a real strong theme of trust here. Let me ask you, if you break someone's trust, if someone breaks your trust, does it matter what they did or whatever, or are they dead to you? And, some people will be like, well, it's man. And these people are like, dead to me, like dead and gone. So I'll say, look, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to ask what it is, but did you have a violation of trust that was pretty significant during your childhood? And usually there's a tear or an ashen face or something like, okay, so just understand, this is probably how your friend group works. There's a tight group and, it's hard to get in and you've had them for a really long time and no one gets in. Your spouse, by the way, they cheat on you. They're never recovering. Let's be clear on that in the partner thing. But man, in the workplace, huge difference if you know this and don't know this. So I work with some people who found out this out afterwards. And so how do they operate in the workplace? They just organize people into can be trusted or not be trusted. The people have no idea about this and it's arbitrary. So you're 5 minutes late to a meeting, you kind of can't be found in the afternoon and you miss a deadline and you're like in jail with a key thrown out with this person. And if they don't know it, they can't communicate it. And so what our leaders have constantly done after figuring out this stuff, they go back to their team and they'd be like, John, just so you know, trust is super important to me as you join my team. It's once it's broken, it's very hard to get back. Mm-hmm. Here are the ways that it's lost. If I feel distant or you are feeling distance from me, it's probably because there's been a break of trust and we should come and have, a discussion. Now, imagine if you knew that as the employee, let's go back to that earlier scenario. You lost your childcare. You're showing up to work late. You're erratic. I am being signaled, I cannot trust John. It's like, the problem is it's real danger signals, for the person. This is someone who can't be trusted. John knows this, and he says to me, I'm not telling anyone this, but I feel embarrassed. We lost my childcare, or this is going on in my marriage, and that's why I'm late. Suddenly, totally different game. You were willing to trust me with that information. Yeah. So I have just seen the leaders for whom it's so dominant in their leadership style, but they're so unaware of it that is an Achilles heel, versus they're like, look, this is me. Here's my playbook. You should be telling everyone, I'm very clear on right. I say it in a different way because mine's more better. Yours, I go, I have an opinion on everything. So you're asking me about red versus black t-shirts. I'm going to tell you my opinion. If you don't need my input on the color of the shirt, don't ask me. That's how you learn to not drive people crazy around it.
Yeah. I even at home on the, because of the, if you're going to, I think this is a generic male-female thing, which is if you ask a man in general, on average, anything, we want to solve the
So
problem.
problem solving versus listening. Yeah.
So, and I'm bad at this, and I still do it. And so when my wife, who we also work together and always have, brings something up, it's like, do you want me to engage or not? Because if not, I would rather you not even just do it and don't even tell me about it.
Well, someone just told me recently, they said they learned the line to say, are you looking for solutions or are you looking for me just to listen? That was a good, and I'm like, we all know we should say that, but we don't.
Okay, what else you got? You got some other question, other interrogation of my values that can help me understand your frame?
So let's see if we can get to a different one. What's something, there's another question. What do people come to you for advice regularly or help?
Their personal problems.
And why do they come to you? What are they hoping that you'll get? Why do they come to you and not someone else?
I mean, this might even sound different or to someone, but I try to listen and I try to actually figure out what's the true thing that's best for them.
Right.
I think that's what I try to do. It's been this way for forever. Like when I was a manager at Viacom, I was often put in the role of having to like adjudicate the challenging case. And it was like, I think it is connected. Actually, as I'm thinking about this now, it is kind of connected to the doing things right. Because
well, I was going to say that could be it could be so dominant.
Because the truth, I'm a deeply, deeply ideological person. I really am.
Yeah.
And I want to know that my beliefs are true.
Yeah. Or right.
Right. Like this is true.
Yeah.
And like false, I don't like. So true, I want to know. And I'm willing to hear out if I'm wrong. And I will switch.
I just said that to you 2 minutes ago. I go, right people will change what they believe is right, but only on their own terms, not if you try to force them into it, it doesn't work.
But I think like if someone comes to me and they're struggling with something, I will go into a kind of Socratic and like investigation. Okay, well, what is it? This is it that? What's going on? How have you tried this? Have you tried that? Like I don't bring my own stuff to it. I just go into like investigator mode, and that does seem to be helpful to people because I actually think what's one of the most interesting things about we were talking off camera about like consulting and how that whole business is kind of going to get fried, like the Accentures of the world or the McKinseys. It's called ChatGPT. But there is this funny thing where I think we are kind of bad at judging ourselves and can be pretty good at dispassionately judging for other people what we're bad for judging ourselves.
Yeah, it's cobbler's kid.
Yeah, so right, exactly. It's like, so being disinterested is this like super important thing to be able to have access to when you need a disinterested party. Like, okay, I'm having this problem. You've got no skin in the game. I'm just going to lay it out for you. You don't know anything about the particulars. You're not an expert in any of it, but you're just like a disinterested party that can listen. That's like super powerful.
Yeah, it's funny. I think there's something about listening for you or hearing or whatever, because obviously even the business that you're in or people's stories, like I think that's actually why people come to you is almost this combination of both of those. Like my guess is people that don't listen probably really frustrate you. See, look, I always say like before people answer me when I do that, their face answers me. They just there's a physiological, reaction. So that's like, those probably work a lot in tandem, to you. People, A, you're a good listener. B, you're good at sorting through the facts and kind of what's right. So if I started playing around with this, I'd be like, okay, how would you like a job where everyone's yelling, no one listens to anyone, you can't make any decisions, right? You can start playing with the avatar. So back to, I was saying, interestingly, like I'll do this. So once I figure out someone's 4 values, if I'm feeling creative enough, I will create an avatar that's the opposite of all of it or a job. And I'm like, tell me, like, what is that? And they're like just just this like revolting face look of like, that sounds just horrible. Like why would I want to talk to that person or have that job? What was interesting was this host I was like, tell me a story about something you can't stand. And he tells me a super specific story like it was yesterday. And I was like, huh. And he was a little dubious. He's a little, high intellect guy who wants proof and data on things. And I was like, definitely there's a core value in there. And as we unpacked it, so what I joke around is if I can do the opposite on 4, that's the supervillain. This story was actually a supervillain. In 5 minutes, we found out it violated 3 of his core values. So credibility. He kept saying, "Look, you can't." The story was that someone showed up in a conversation, didn't listen to the other person, asserted a bullshit theory, and acted unhumble, in doing it, and listening, credibility, and humility were not those one words, but they were basically his core. And the credibility thing, he just kept, your credibility is important. And I'm like, all right, and this is not a guy who'd be, I'm like, this, where does that come from? He's like, well, of course, that's family stuff. So we didn't get more into it, but I think there was probably a dad who said a lot of things in a real credible way to this person,
strong voice of authority
as a kid. And this kid is knowing him now is brilliant. And as he got older, he realized those things were not true. And those things were not backed by fact, but they were said in such an authoritative, bullying way that they were to be accepted as truth. So now he is very distrustful of people who, I had a very similar story with an employee. I mean, these things are fascinating when you hear where they come from. She, and again, to her leadership this day, you must bring facts and data to convince her of anything. You can't bring a theory or a hunch or whatever. Why? She basically had a conspiracy theorist mother as a kid who told her all of these things that were wacky. And at some point she realized they all weren't true. So it's very logical that a person
Maybe
like
some
that—
of them were true.
It's very logical that a person like that would grow up and say, look, you have to prove, I need to see the proof, of whatever your theory is. And it's super interesting because that was able to help her in the workplace to be able to communicate to her team, I'm not being short with you. Just understand, when you want to get my buy-in to something,
Make the case.
I need to see the case. I need to see the data behind it. And his story was so similar to that because you just kept saying passion. You have to be credible. And I'm like, that's so strong that I can just sense when it comes from somewhere.
I mean, treating other people with they don't matter or they're below you or they're not a person, they're not a person of equal dignity is pretty much an almost instantly fireable offense for me.
Yeah. So elitism is not a big thing with you.
But it's not even about, I mean, it can manifest as being an elitist, but just
disrespect or humility,
so I've for a long time I've directed commercials and stuff and in the sort of, whether it's a big movie or a big commercial, it's very hierarchical. I mean, you're in marketing, so you know this sort of thing. So maybe it's funny.
Your value is probably no one's better than anyone or something like that.
I have a strong sense of equality in that way. And I think the funny thing, now that I'm thinking about it, my dad is a surgeon, but he's a South Philly guy that one of the things when I think about my dad and the stuff I did growing up, it was crawling under the crawl space, getting covered in Pink Panther insulation, which is itchy and horrible. To fix
take a few years off your life with that.
It's but that sense of
nothing's beneath you.
No, and and
no or yes? You mean yes? Nothing's beneath you. Yeah,
I take almost pride in I'll get under there and fix that myself.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll do it just so that you all can see that nothing's beneath any of us. And if you act like things are beneath you, or if you treat other people as if they are beneath you, it is like a violation that can't really be resolved.
So look at this. In how many minutes we're circled around 3 of these pretty strongly, right? And again, you're going to think about him. So if I thought about your work environments, there's going to be a lot of listening. There's going to be a lot of debate about what's right, and there's going to be a lot of not hierarchy, and flat organizations.
And I think the thing is, yeah, it is. It all, it's dad saves America. It all comes back to your relationship with your dad.
It is all childhood stuff. Yours are positive. A lot of people's are not, right? And or again, there could be some real thing. Look, there is probably someone who got so tired of having to do all the things that they actually became certain things are beneath you, right? It connects differently, for different people. But yeah, these things are they're deep. Right?
I mean, I'll give you one other story along these lines, which is, we built a house. And we were renting down the street. I go to the site. It's like right around the corner. Yeah. And I go to the site every day. And I love the guys, the Weiss brothers. So if you're looking for a house in Austin, hire the Weiss brothers. They're 2 carpenters, really quality work. And one of these days, the guys are talking. And they say, they were on a job site. And it's not the first time they've heard things like this. But their client, the guy that was had hired them to build the house, said to his son in earshot of them, you got to work hard. You got to do well in school because you don't want to end up swinging a hammer for the rest of your life. And even saying that, I can feel myself like filling with a kind of rage.
You're giving us a video of what it looks like when your core value is violated.
It's like, how dare you say that in front of him?
See, but here's what I would argue. Maybe you walk away with a newfound thing in life. It's the electric fence. You've known these things your life. You've known them. You get electrocuted a little bit. You go away from it. There's a big difference maybe now that you can put some word on this and be like, that's why it's driving me crazy. Or that person I need to fire because they, I think we operate with gut around it. When you actually can put some names on these, it's kind of like, it makes it a lot easier.
It's, yeah, like I can feel like my throat is actually like aggravated thinking about that story.
I could create you a supervillain. Yeah,
that story was so outrageous to me. It just like I saw red.
Yeah,
it was like,
it's not right. Also, right?
yeah, it's false. But just the level of disrespect.
All right. Well, you're proving a lot of things with me. If we could just use I always say, I joke around. When I do this anti thing, if I ask people and they're thinking about it, I'm like, no, not barking up the right tree. If I ask them and they go, like I'm like, oh, right tree, yeah.
How have you changed the way you navigate the world as a business leader and as a father?
Yeah.
Having like lived with this and what how are you a different person today than you were, let's say, 10 years ago or before you began putting so much energy into this kind of thinking?
Yeah, I'm not about more. So when I figured this stuff out, there was a whole bunch of things I doubled down on, and there was a bunch of things that I stopped doing. And I think as a parent, what was really cool was to give myself permission to not worry about or do stuff or not have guilt around it, and understand that actually I am going to be best with my kids when I am helping to figure themselves to something new, having a respectfully authentic conversation with them, working with them on their independence and self-reliance. My kids all have their own jobs. They all went to overnight camp. Like, these, I'm going to show up for my kids best in the service of their core values. So I violated this rule this week because I only have one kid left at home. But one of the things I gave us permission to do is I stopped going to parents' nights. I was the ADD kid in school. Like, I barely could pay attention anyway. And these parents' nights, I'm like not even in the room, and I'm sitting in the little chair, and they read the same thing over and over. I'm like, I actually get nothing out of this. My wife really enjoys it, and that's great. Because I trust the teachers to do their job. We send the kids to a good school. We live in a good town. And it doesn't
trust but verify.
It doesn't make me a better father. there's stuff I have to be like, look, my wife is so much better at certain things. And I just like, I'm going to let you do that. I'm definitely like, I'll take them on the obstacle course. She is so much better at empathy. Like I'm not as good at it, right? When they need empathy, she's the right parent for them. When they need a little tough love and a little pushing, she's not as good as that. Like, and I'm better at it. And we try to bridge the difference. But I think like it's really cool to be like, if you were thinking of like, oh, what are the activities I could do with my kids where about solving problems or figuring out the right answer, or that show them that, people are all on the same page or listening, like that's the stuff where you're going to light up and you're going to want to do it. But to do more of that, there's other stuff that you can't do. So I was thinking about this. It's funny. Like there's a lot of things sometimes where I'll tell my kids no, but my daughter's like, I want to run a 10K for the first time. She's down at Emory. I love when they do things for the first time. I'm flying down there overnight. It's a stupid amount of money. I'm running it with her because like that's important to me and that's important to her. And that's a great, intersection. And
you can run a 10K and not be vomiting halfway through. That's pretty good.
I actually it's pretty interesting. So it's funny. This is the tech world. I've been getting myself in really good shape, hence my core value of health, because I turned 50 and I'm trying to be biologically 40 at 50. That's been my goal for the year. And my watches, both my smart watches have helped me
without doing any
so
odd tech bro stuff.
No, I don't take weird stuff or any of that stuff.
Your kids are not going to be your blood bank?
No. This is all just more sleep, more exercise, more strength training. I used to do cardio. So I haven't really run long in a while. And I went and ran 4 miles the other day. And then I took the stats from the run on my watch and I put it in ChatGPT and I said, how long would I need based on, then it had the heart rate and everything. It was like, no, you could have done it today at this pace, but here's the 3-week training plan. I was like, this is amazing. Like when it processed the data. So yeah, again, I'm going to hop on a plane, fly down, run it with her and fly back because that is a being better, independence. It's like a 4 core value checkbox, right? So I'm excited to do that.
As we wrap up, we have a world that's sort of starving for, I would say, starving for a healthy normal.
Meaning, yeah.
I think that there's meaning. There's a lot of things that are going wrong, and there's a story that I've found to be unpersuasive, even though I think it's true, which is, and we've kind of touched on it, which is like, man, 100 years ago, life sucked. Life's great. Shut up. Like that's sort of how that gets received. Like we've been here before. It was the tractor and it disrupted X, Y, and Z, and life's a lot better now.
Yeah.
I have watched how ineffective that is at hitting someone who feels like their life is hard. Because it's like, well, I don't care about farmers' kids. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
So our kids and young adults are struggling along a lot of dimensions. What's the tool set to engage in this in the way that can help them start to like move forward one day at a time, one step at a time, in a way towards being healthy, towards having agency, towards like, okay, I'm on the road. I'm not dragged. I'm not like in a ditch. I'm on the road. Maybe I'm not going as fast as I want to, but I'm on the road. What's your advice?
I think it starts with the locus of control, right? Like, what are the things that we control? This we talked about, this sort of victimology is just not helping anyone. It's funny. I think both things are true. The argument that, hey, just shut up, it's been worse, whatever is not super helpful. But the inverse is true too. Like when this is the worst time in the history of the world, your suffering does not have an exclusive difference from problems and suffering 100 years ago or 300 years ago, 1,000 years ago. So I think it really starts with looking at yourself and what you can do. And to me, this is literally the core of that. And stop worrying about what the world owes you and everything else or otherwise. Yes, there are good breaks and bad breaks and a bunch of things. But kind of think if you kind of put it on yourself to start the work or do the work, and I would say, look, if you don't want to read the book, you don't just answer those 6 questions. Like, see what kind of stuff comes up. But I am a self-reliance why, a core value, right? So this is sort of inherently comes from me. But I think we need to listen more. We got to focus on what we can do. And we've got to stop feeling like, even if things are hard, that we're a victim of something or someone owes us something, because I don't think that's going to get us any progress. And from the parent side, like, we've got to stop saving our kids from discomfort, and we've got to have harder conversations and have these value conversations. And, I think this is Abigail Schreier, who I really like her work, had a quote after the Charlie Kirk thing a few weeks ago and said, it is exponentially harder to transmit your values to your kids these days because the external influences are everywhere and prevalent. And so if you thought they say this rule of 7 in the workplace, if you thought you said it once or twice, they probably need to be like, dad or mom, like, I don't want to hear this ism like one more time, because to me, that's inoculation around all the noise out there and the people trying to tell them stories and get them in the online or the teachers or any of this stuff. So I think coming back to a little bit these principles, and there's just too much stuff, right? It's overwhelming right now. So what are the few things that matter? What are the few things that you can hang, your hat on? I just think that's going to make you feel better and have a little bit more direction.
I think that's really great advice. My second to last question is this. So much of what we've talked about is about looking inward, and it's about trying to understand ourselves. One could argue, and I think there's a case for this, that one of the pathologies of our time in the U.S. in particular is like the hangover of the self-help movement. The me. Like Abigail Schreier, her book "Bad Therapy" is about
like everyone should read that book. Like if you are a parent and you have a younger kid, like it is a must-read book.
Yeah. So we have all of this focus, all of this cultural energy. I just saw Abigail at an event, and she was talking about the like schools like in Illinois that are now requiring these like psych surveys that are basically like self-harm push polls. They're absolutely
constantly asking people if they're suicidal, where there's not a risk factor, shows that people start to be like, should I be thinking about this?
Right. Right. Here is a list of things that maybe you may have done to yourself. Like it speaks to this thing, like, how do you place your thought, your advice, your exercise here in that broader context of a country and a culture that has where we have encouraged maybe too much focusing inward and not enough just like, hey, go get a friggin' job and do the work for someone else and set your ego aside, because there's going to be a lot of lessons that go into the adult life of that.
Well, I think I think I'm encouraging a different version of the me story. I think the me one that Abigail talks about is, this is me and the world should orient around me. Right? That is not the helpful narrative, right? Versus, this is me, and because I understand myself, I should think about where I want to connect with and not connect with, and what would be the best fit for me. But I am not looking for, nor I am expecting the world to orient around me. My favorite stories of that book was when she talked about her grandmother, right, who lost both their parents and they died and had no one at 8 or 10. She's like, my grandmother went on to do all these amazing things because no one changed the expectations for her. When they put her in school, it was, you're supposed to do it. And she's like, today she would have been pulled out and put in, and they would have handicapped her, rather than keeping the expectations high and then supporting her. But I think I don't know what you think, but that's how I visualize the difference between those two things, which is like, And it doesn't work because if everyone assumes that the world orients around them and their bubble and their problems and their allergies. You can't have any like common connection. I think this is like, look, like what is true for me, and how do I go out and find the best way to make that effective, right?
Is a way to put that, understand the shape of your puzzle piece so you know what it looks like when you see like, oh man, like that hole in that organization or that opportunity, man, I just plug right into that.
Right. Not, hey, here's my piece. Everyone should build their puzzle around my piece, right? I think that's the opposite.
I think about it in this way. If I'm interviewing someone for a job and all they can talk about is what they want to get out of it, they will not be hired. Yeah. Because that's not what jobs are. Jobs are about what you're going to do for me. I'm going to pay you money.
Yeah.
There's more exchange than just money for services.
Right.
But
how are you going to contribute to what's important to us?
But if you like don't care about what we do, if you're not seeing this as a chance to be a contributor, but you're just like, here's what I hope to get out of it. Here's where I want to go. Here's the things I love.
Go drive for Uber. You can be your own boss, right?
And like that is that feels like the maybe part of the puzzle that needs to be on the table, and that we need to. I grew up. I've raised my son constantly saying the world doesn't care about you.
I love that. I know it's
the world doesn't. The world doesn't have a brain. It doesn't have a heart. I mean, we're Catholic. I believe that there's God and there's a love of the universe.
But you are not the center of the universe.
And the material world is just the world, and you will come and go just as the sun will eventually explode. So like that. Like you're not the center of the world. The world doesn't care about you. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
That's like, I don't know what that is, but that's not reality. And I hope it's made an impact. I think it's helped him be a little stoic.
Yeah, but just maybe you can tip it a little bit or impact it a little bit, or leave having left a footprint that matters, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't owe you anything.
Look, it sounds tough, but again, I love the respectful authenticity stuff. If you start with that orientation, this we are owed. This did not work well in World War I and the Germans and the grievance, and we are owed stuff. Like this is what led to all of Hitler and all this stuff, by telling all these kids that they were responsible for decisions that their grandparents, made. So we've screwed this up both ways. We need to acknowledge history and the things that have gone on and be honest about that. But like, if your dad was a great guy and you're a schmuck, like you don't get credit for that. Similarly, if your great grandfather was a jerk and you're a great guy and helps you, that's not your problem. And so this has been a huge disservice. It's like, you have one life to live. No one owes you anything. Go live it.
I ask this of every guest, especially on the first time on the show. The show is called Dad Saves America because I do believe that's a role we play as men. That's powerful. That makes an impact first in your family, but then in the community and the country. The country's better if we have dads taking that role seriously. How do you think about your role in the American story?
I don't believe any of our solutions are going to come from government or politics. Like I think when I think about my experience, I'm trying to help build better leaders in my family and outside of my family, because that's had the biggest impact on me. And I think there's some people that may want to do it, but they don't have the tactics, or they just haven't been inspired. But I think great leaders is what is going to drive, the American story and improvement in our lives. I'm out on anyone in government being the solution to anything at this point. And so I think if we can, America is about creation. If we can create better leaders and better companies, these things happen in pockets, right? If you actually follow like some of these great leaders, you go, oh, he was on this person's team with all these people. And I mean, it has a multi-generational impact. The inverse is true too. These 4 people were traumatized by this person and then went on to lead horribly. So that's kind of what I'm focused on. And I think that's inherently American, hopefully.
Rob Glazer, The Compass Within. Thanks for being on Dad Saves America.
Thanks for having me.